I always thought the quiet nights were supposed to be the easy ones. In a town like ours, quiet doesn't just mean peaceful. It means empty. The kind of empty where the street lamps hum louder than the traffic, and the air feels like it's holding something it doesn't want to talk about. People here go to bed early. They lock their doors without thinking. They trust the dark because it's always been gentle to them. But the dark wasn't gentle that night. I remember the clock on the dispatch room wall ticking past 2:14 a.m. The sound was so sharp it almost felt rude. I was on my third cup of stale coffee, pretending the bitterness helped me stay awake. It didn't. My eyes burned, my back ached, and my mind kept drifting in that strange half-sleep where every thought feels like it has an echo. Then the 911 line lit up. Usually the phone rings. Usually there's a voice on the other end. But this call was different. The system flashed open line, and a cold little prickle skated down my arms. That alert only shows when someone dials, but doesn't say anything or can't. I pressed the headset against my ear and said the usual script. 911, what's your emergency? Nothing. Just breathing. Slow, shaky, too close to the mic. The kind of breathing you hear from someone who's either terrified or trying very hard not to be heard. I waited a few seconds before I spoke again. This is Officer Hale. If you can't talk, make a noise. Tap once for yes, twice for no. Still nothing. Just that breathing, rising and falling like waves hitting a shore in the dark. I felt my shoulders tense. I don't know why. Maybe it was a late hour. Maybe it was the cold that kept creeping through the room even though the heater was on. Or maybe it was that instinct you get as a cop. The one that whispers something's wrong before your brain can figure out why. Okay, I said gently. I'm here. You're not alone. If you're hurt, I need you to try to make any sound at all. A tap, a hum, anything. Then I heard it. A faint scratching. It was so soft, I thought it was interference. The line already had static dancing through it in thin, broken waves. But the scratching wasn't random. It came in slow, dragging strokes, like someone running their fingernails across wood. Long, careful. Too controlled to be accidental. My stomach tightened. I sat up straighter. Are you in danger? The scratching stopped. The breathing changed. Faster now, uneven. Whoever it was sounded like they were trying not to cry or trying not to breathe at all. A harsh swallow clicked through the line, and the hairs on the back of my neck lifted. Listen, if there's someone with you, stay quiet. I whispered, even though whispering changes nothing on a phone line. But it felt right. It felt like raising my voice would pull something toward us. I typed a quick trace request into the system. Usually it's automatic. Usually it takes seconds. But the system spun like it was thinking too hard, stuck on a loop. A little red exclamation mark flashed. Unable to locate. Signal unstable. Unstable? In our town? We barely even have hills. Calls don't fail here. I tried again. Same result. That's when I heard the scratching start again. Only now it wasn't slow. It was frantic, sharp, like someone was dragging something hard across a surface over and over, trying to get attention or trying to break free. The breathing turned to soft whimpers. Hey, listen to me, I said, feeling my chest tighten with panic. You're doing great. I hear you. I'm going to help you. Just stay on the line. Keep making that sound. The scratching stopped again, but the caller was still there, breathing, trembling, and in the faint static swimming behind their breaths, something else flickered, a kind of low vibration. A hum maybe? I leaned closer to the headset, trying to pick it apart. No, not a hum, a voice, but not clear, more like a shape of a voice, a tone without words, like someone talking from the other side of a wall, too muffled to make out. I don't scare easily. But something about that sound, whatever it was, slid under my skin like ice water. I cleared my throat. If someone's with you, don't speak. I understand. But if you can you tap again? Anything at all? Silence. The breathing cut off completely. It was like the caller was holding their breath. Or like they'd been stopped. I held my own breath without meaning to. The static hissed softly, and in the middle of it, that faint murmur fluttered again. Low, smooth, almost amused. I swallowed hard and forced myself to sound steady. Caller, if you can hear me, I am dispatching patrol officers to your location. Stay on the line. I need you to. Then the breathing returned all at once, fast, shaking, like someone had just surfaced from underwater. But it wasn't the same as before. It was harsher, wet, almost rasping. Are you hurt? I asked, leaning closer. Is someone hurting you right now? The answer I got wasn't from the caller. It was from the static. A crackle snapped to the headset, so violently it made me flinch. It wasn't loud, just sharp, like a whispered warning forced through a clenched jaw. Then the line dissolved into a thick wash of noise, rising and falling like a tide pulling back from the shore. Then nothing. Not a click, not a drop, just dead, empty silence. The call was still active, though. The timer kept ticking on the screen. 00:01:42. 00:01:43. But there was no one there on the other side. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. I tried to trace again. The system blinked, then finally spat out partial data. Just a few numbers, broken and incomplete, but enough to recognize the source. The call was pinging from outside town, near the old service road by the quarry. A dead zone. Nobody lives out there. Nobody goes there after dark unless they're lost or they're doing something they don't want witnesses for. I grabbed the mic. Unit 3. Respond to the old quarry service road. Possible open line emergency. Caller is silent, but breathing was heard. Line still active. Approach quietly. The response crackled in. Officer Meeks, half asleep but sharpening fast. Copy that. En route. I kept my headset on, even though the line stayed silent. I don't know why. Maybe I felt like hanging up would be abandoning whoever had called. Maybe I was hoping the breathing would return. Or maybe I was afraid of hearing that other sound again, the low, blurred voice hiding in the static. The seconds crawled. 2:19 a.m. 2:20. 2:22. Meek's voice came through the radio. Dispatch. I'm at the turnoff. No vehicles. No lights. Nothing yet. I press the transmitter. Copy. Keep looking. Trace pinpoints about 30 yards off the road. On foot now, Meek said. It's dark as hell out here. I waited. My fingers curled around the mic until my knuckles ached. Then he spoke again, quieter. Dispatch. I think I hear something. My heartbeat stumbled. What kind of something? There was a long pause before he answered. Breathing. It's faint. Might be an injured person. My mouth went dry. I looked at the silent phone line still shining red on the console. Approach with caution, I said. Describe the surroundings. Meeks didn't respond at first. When he did, his voice sounded tight, uncertain. There's, scratch marks on the dirt, like someone dragged something, or someone was dragged. My skin went cold. How fresh? I whispered. Fresh, he said. Really fresh. Then, in the faint distance behind Meek's words, I heard it, that same soft static, like the call was bleeding through the radio. Even though I knew that wasn't possible, it fizzled at the edges of his transmission, almost hiding behind his breathing. My throat tightened. Meeks, do you read? But he didn't answer. Not right away. The radio crackled once, then twice. Then his voice came through, barely above a whisper. Dispatch, someone's here. Static washed over his words. Thick, wet, wrong. Meeks, fall back. Do not engage. Repeat, fall back right now. He didn't reply. The radio clicked softly, then went dead. The 911 call timer on my screen froze at 00:04:09 and then blinked out. Call ended. Just like that. I sat there listening to the empty hum of the dispatch room, feeling the weight of the silence press against my chest. My heartbeat felt too loud. My breathing felt wrong inside my own ears. Whatever happened out there, it wasn't done with us. Not even close. And all I could think about was the sound of that scratching and the way the static had shaped itself into something like a voice, something patient, something calm, something that sounded like it had been waiting a long, long time for someone to listen. I wished I hadn't answered that call, but it was too late for wishes, and the line was still open inside my head, whether the system showed it or not. If you're ready, Abu, drop Chapter 2's title plus word count plus details, and I'll dive straight in. You said, you are a professional long-form horror scriptwriter specialized in writing YouTube horror stories in the same tone and structure as The Dark One. Write a cinematic first-person horror script based on the chapter details I will provide. Style and tone requirements. First-person narration. Simple, immersive language, 5th to 8th grade level. Grounded realism, slow dread, no jump scares, creeping psychological horror, trauma, or surreal elements. Strong inner monologue, visual detail, eerie tone. Script length. According to mentioned words, you should follow the word count. Do not write scene instructions. Just write the raw storytelling script in plain format, like the character is telling the story directly. Ensure the writing feels human, with natural pauses, real fear, real memories, and no robotic phrases or stiff transitions. Also ensure that it is perfect for AI voiceover tools to generate voiceover. Skull, I will provide the chapter one by one. Wait for my input. Red triangle point down, start with this chapter. Chapter title. Chapter 2, The Empty House on Piper Road. 1,300 words, the officer checks the address in the call and finds an empty home, but signs someone left seconds earlier. ChatGPT said, "All right, Abu, I got you. Here comes Chapter 2, written exactly in the same tone and style as Chapter 1. First person, slow dread, grounded, immersive, human, and 1,300 words on the depth. Chapter 2, The Empty House on Piper Road. 1,300 words. I didn't sleep after Meeks went silent. I just sat there in that dim dispatch room, staring at the dead radio like it might suddenly wake up and explain everything. It didn't. Nothing did. The walls felt tighter, the air felt stale, and every small noise in the building made me flinch. At 3:02 a.m., I finally made the call I didn't want to make. I grabbed my jacket, logged myself as active, and stepped out into the cold. The night was black in a way that didn't look natural. No moon, no wind, just deep, heavy stillness, like the world was holding its breath. The trace from the call, the broken one, had given us a partial address. 317 Piper Road. I knew that place. Everyone did. An old rental house behind the Oak Line. Barely used, mostly forgotten. The owners lived 2 states away, and the place sat empty most months. Dead lawn, sagging porch, paint peeling like old skin. But something pulled me there anyway. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was fear, maybe it was the thought of Meek's voice fading into static. The drive took 7 minutes. They felt like 70. The road narrowed the farther I went, trees closing in like ribs around a heart. My headlights carved a thin tunnel through the dark, and I kept catching shapes at the edge of my vision. Branches, shadows, maybe my own nerves forming faces where there were none. When I turned onto Piper Road, my chest tightened. The house sat at the end like it always had. But something felt wrong. Not visibly, not physically, just wrong in that deep, instinctive way your body knows before your mind does. I parked by the curb and killed the engine. Silence rushed in. Too fast. Too complete. For a few seconds, I just sat there. Then I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The air smelled stale. Not rotten. Not dirty. Just stale. Like a room that had been shut too long. The porch creaked under my boots as I approached, and the sound echoed in the stillness like it didn't belong there. I knocked on the door out of habit. Police. Anyone inside? My voice sounded thin. Small. No answer. But the door wasn't fully latched. Just barely touching the frame. A tiny breeze moved at a few millimeters. Enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. I nudged it open, and something warm brushed past my face. Not a hand. Not an object. Air. Warm air. Which made no sense, because the house should have been cold. It hadn't been heated in months. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned softly. My flashlight cut across the living room. Dusty couch, old TV, empty corner table. The same sad furniture that had been here for years. But what caught my eye wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't. Dust. There was a clean trail across the floor, like someone had walked through, and not long ago. The disturbed dust still floated in the beam of my flashlight. Tiny bright specks drifting lazily in the air. Someone had been inside. Recently, my breath hitched, and for a second I listened, really listened, a faint ticking. The old wall clock above the door, somehow still working. My own breath, too loud in my ears. The soft settling creaks of the house. But underneath all that, something else. A faint hum, like static, not loud, not clear, just barely there, tucked in the silence like a hidden thread. I followed the dust trail. It led to the living room, past the small hallway, and into the kitchen. My flashlight swept the counters. Crumbs, an old coffee mug, a cracked plate. It all looked untouched for months. But the back door, the lock hung crooked. Fresh scratches lined the wood around the latch. Deep ones, ugly ones, like someone had forced it open from the outside. I crouched to inspect the marks. My finger hovered over one of the grooves, and I felt my stomach twist. The wood wasn't chipped in random chunks. The lines were smooth, clean, like fingernails. I stood up fast. Something brushed against the window behind me. A soft, quick movement. I spun, flashlight slicing across the glass. Nothing, just my own pale reflection staring back at me. Eyes wide, breathing uneven. I swallowed and tried to steady myself. Anyone here? This is the police. Make yourself known. The house stayed silent. But the clean dust trail didn't stop at the kitchen. It continued toward the stairs. I really didn't want to go upstairs. My body practically begged me not to. But duty, instinct, guilt, they all pushed me forward one step at a time. The stairs creaked under my weight. Halfway up, a cold shiver crawled down my spine. So sharp I had to stop and grip the railing. That's when I smelled it. A faint scent. Not strong. Not unpleasant. But wrong in the context of an empty house. Warm soap. The kind you smell after someone finishes a hot shower. Fresh. I climbed the last steps. The upstairs hallway stretched out, narrow and dim. My flashlight showed more dust trails, multiple now, overlapping like someone had paced back and forth. A bedroom door on the left stood open just a little. I approached slowly. The smell grew stronger. I nudged the door with my foot and stepped inside. The bed was unmade. The blanket was twisted, crumpled, like someone had gotten up in a rush. The pillow had a fresh indentation, the shape of a head. I moved closer, heart thudding. The dust on the nightstand was disturbed too. And there, right beside the lamp, lay a cell phone. Black, screen cracked, but not dead. The display glowed faintly. For minutes and 9 seconds call in progress. My throat closed. That was the exact timestamp when the 911 call had cut out. I reached the phone, hand trembling, and picked it up. It was warm, not room temperature warm, body warm. Someone had been holding it seconds ago. I pressed it to my ear. Silence. No breathing. No scratching. No voice hiding in the static. Just a faint, steady hum. My pulse pounded in my neck. I turned, scanning the room again. The floor beside the bed caught my eye. Fresh footprints in the dust. Bare footprints. Light, small, leading toward the closet. I didn't want to check the closet, but I did. I moved to the door, held my breath, and swung it open. Empty. Just a few forgotten hangers swaying slightly, like someone had brushed past them moments earlier. One hanger kept moving longer than the others, creaking softly in the dark. Something in my chest tightened painfully. Someone had been here. They weren't here now, but they couldn't have gone far. I backed away, my hand still gripping the warm phone. I stepped into the hallway again, scanning both ends. The air felt wrong up here. Heavy, pressed in, like the hallway wasn't big enough for me, and something else. I heard it again, that faint static, not from the phone, from down the hall. I turned my head slowly, aiming the beam toward the farthest room. The door was half open, the darkness behind it thick and unmoving. I took a step toward it, and stopped, because something else caught my eye. On the wall beside me, scratch marks. Faint, but there. Dozens of short, desperate lines, clustered near the floorboards. Too low to be from furniture. Too messy to be accidental. I crouched and touched one. The wood was warm. A breath caught in my throat. Someone had done this recently. Too recently. I stood too fast, dizziness washing over me. The hum in the air grew louder, not by much, but enough to feel like it was inside my ears, inside my bones, a soft vibration running through the walls. I backed up until my shoulder touched the hallway wall. I needed to get out. Right now. I turned, moved toward the stairs, and stopped again, at the bottom of the staircase. The front door was slightly more open than before. Not fully, just an inch, just enough to show someone had touched it. My heart knocked against my ribs. I gripped the railing and forced my feet to start moving. Halfway down, the house shifted. Not a real earthquake shift, more like a pressure change. Like the air moved in one slow wave. The hum stopped, and in the stillness that followed, I heard breathing. Not mine, not from upstairs, from the bottom of the stairs, right by the open door. I froze. The breathing was soft, weak, almost like whoever it belonged to was exhausted, or hurt, or hiding. I forced myself to speak. Hello? This is Officer Hale. I'm here to help. The breathing didn't change, didn't stop, didn't move. I took one step down, then another. My boot hit the bottom floorboard, and the breathing cut off instantly. The house went silent, completely silent. I reached the front door, grabbed the edge, and yanked it open. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and clean. But whoever had been breathing, whoever had been here seconds ago, was gone. No footprints, no noise, nothing. Just the quiet street, the empty yard, the black tree swallowing the edges of the world. I stepped outside and looked around, heart still hammering. Something was close. Something had been here. And whatever it wasn't running from me. It was watching. The warm phone buzzed once in my hand, screen flickering like it wasn't done speaking yet. And I knew, deep down, I wasn't done with this house. Not even close. I should have left that house the moment the cold air hit me. Any sane person would have. But when you're a cop, you learn to ignore the part of your brain that whispers get out. You tell yourself you're trained. You tell yourself fear is just another noise in the dark. You lie to yourself. And sometimes the lie works. That night, it didn't. I stood on the porch for a long time, staring out into the trees, hoping the breathing I heard inside had been my imagination. But the phone in my hand kept buzzing every few seconds, tiny weak pulses like a heartbeat losing strength. It wasn't a notification. The screen never changed. It was just buzzing, like it wanted my attention, or wanting to go back inside. I finally stepped back over the threshold. The moment I did, the buzzing stopped. The house swallowed me again. Its stale air, its soft floor creaks, its quiet that felt too heavy. I closed the door behind me. Maybe I shouldn't have. I stood there for a few seconds, letting my eyes adjust. The hallway looked normal again. Too normal. No breathing. No movement. No signs anyone had been downstairs. But something was different. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the house was holding something under its skin, and it was waiting for me to peel the next layer. I turned toward the kitchen, expecting to continue the search upstairs. Then I heard it, a faint tap, not from above, from below. The basement door stood at the end of the hallway. Plain white, old brass knob, paint cracked near the hinges. It had always looked harmless. Now it looked like a mouth closed tight. The tap came again. One single, soft knock on wood. Not urgent, not loud, just patient. I walked toward it even though every step felt wrong. When I reached the door, I pressed my ear against it. At first, I heard nothing, just that strange, thick silence again. Then a voice drifted up through the wood. A woman's voice. Calm, measured, too familiar. Officer Hale, it said. I jerked back so fast I almost lost my footing. That was my dispatcher's voice. That was Diane's voice. Except it wasn't coming through my radio or my phone. It was coming from the basement, deep, muffled, like she was standing at the bottom of the stairs calling up to me. I tried to breathe. My throat felt tight. I tapped my radio. Diane, you copy? Static answered. I tried again. Diane, are you calling me? The radio cracked faintly, then died flat again. I stared at the basement door, feeling something cold bloom behind my ribs. Her voice floated up again. Hale, come down. I need you." The tone was wrong. Not scared, not stressed. Just steady, too steady. Diane never sounded like that, even on quiet nights. She always had this little tired fuzz in her voice, like she'd been living on stale coffee and cheap donuts for 20 years. But the voice in the basement was clean, smooth, like it hadn't been shaped by a real throat. I whispered, "That's not you," but the voice answered anyway. "Hey-o, come down now." No emotion, no breath behind it, just words, like someone was copying a sound they'd heard once. I gripped the doorknob. It was warm. The basement in this house shouldn't have been warm. It shouldn't have been anything but cold concrete and stale mildew. But something warm pressed through the brass into my palm, like someone had touched it second before. The phone in my other hand buzzed again, a single faint tremor, like encouragement, against everything in me. I opened the door. The hinges groaned softly. The smell that rose up wasn't rot, or dust, or mold. It was the smell of old paper, old breath, old rooms that had been forgotten too long. The stairs dropped steeply into darkness. My flashlight beam scraped across the narrow walls as I stepped down. I kept waiting for the voice, but it didn't come again. Not yet. When my boot hit the concrete floor, cold spread up my legs. The basement wasn't finished. Bare walls. A single bulb overhead. Dead. A faint rust smell in the air. My light drifted across the room. At first, nothing stood out. Old boxes stacked in a corner. A broken chair. A rusted toolbox. Then the voice came again. But this time, it came from behind me. "Hey-o." I spun so hard the flashlight shook in my hand. Nobody there. The stairs behind me were empty. The door at the top was still cracked open. A slice of the hallway light cut down the steps like a narrow blade. I swallowed hard. My breath came out in a cloud, even though the air wasn't cold. The voice drifted again, right beside my ear. "Come closer." I stumbled back, nearly hitting the wall. "No," I whispered. "No, you're not real." The voice didn't argue. It didn't change tone. It didn't try to convince me. It just copied Diane again, perfectly. Too perfectly. "You need to see this." My light passed over the concrete, across the boxes, and stopped. Footprints. Bare, dusty footprints, leading deeper into basement, toward a low doorway half hidden by a sheet of hanging plastic. The footprints were fresh, sharp, as if someone had walked through seconds before. My mouth went dry. I took one slow step forward. The air changed again. Not warmer, not colder, just thicker, like walking through a place where a lot of breathing had happened and none of it had escaped. My flashlight shook as I reached the plastic sheet. The voice whispered from behind it, "Hey, help me." And this time, it sounded almost sad, almost human, almost. I pushed the plastic aside. A small utility room sat behind it. Bare walls, empty shelves, nothing unusual, except for the corner. In the corner was a small table. On the table was an old cassette recorder. Black, dusty, one red light blinking faintly on the side. A recorder shouldn't work in an abandoned house with no power. My heart beat slower, harder, like each thud had to force itself forward. The red light blinked again. The voice came from the recorder. "Hey-o." I stared. My skin crawled. I stepped closer, drawn to it even though I wanted to turn and run straight up the stairs. The recorder crackled softly, then played again. "Hey-o, come down. I need you." The exact same words I heard through the door. The exact same tone. The exact same wrongness. Like a puppet repeating lines it barely understood. I reached out slowly and stopped the recorder. The button clicked under my finger. Silence. For a moment, the room was still. No voice. No breath. No hum. Then I heard something else. Not from the recorder. From behind me. A soft drag across concrete. Like a bare foot. I turned, choking on the air. A shadow moved just beyond my flashlight's edge. Quick. Small. Gone before my eyes could lock onto it. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. "Who's there?" My voice barely came out. The answer wasn't a voice. It was breathing. Soft. Slow. right behind the plastic hanging in the doorway. I pointed my light at the plastic. It fluttered once, like someone had brushed a hand across it from the other side. The breathing grew louder, not desperate, not scared, controlled, steady, like someone was mimicking breathing instead of doing it. The plastic sheet trembled gently. I held my breath, gripping my light tight enough to hurt. For a second, I swear I could see the outline of a face behind the plastic. Something too long, too narrow, pressed close to the other side. Then the phone in my hand buzzed so violently I nearly dropped it. The screen glowed bright. Call in progress 1 second. I didn't press anything. I didn't dial anything. But the call had started. And through the speaker, through the tiny holes meant for my ear, came a whisper. Not Diane's. Not the thing in the basement. My own voice. Hale, look behind you. The flashlight slipped from my hand. Darkness swallowed half the room as the beam spun across concrete. My heart slammed against my ribs. My lungs seized. I didn't want to turn, but I did, slowly, shaking. The plastic sheet was still, perfectly still. The breathing had stopped. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Then the recorder behind me clicked itself back on, a soft whir, a crackle, and then a whisper that crawled into my bones. You were supposed to come sooner. I bolted. I don't even remember grabbing the flashlight. I don't remember running up the stairs. My legs moved before my mind caught up. The door slammed behind me, rattling the frame. I staggered into the hallway, chest burning, vision blurring. The house felt different, like walls had shifted while I was downstairs, like the air had learned my breathing rhythm. I stumbled outside, sucking in cold air like a drowning man. But even out there, even under the empty sky, my phone was still on. The call was still active. My voice whispered on the line, "Don't run. You'll get lost." And the buzzing started again, slow, steady, like a heartbeat calling me back. I didn't sleep at all that night. I didn't even try. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again, the breathing, that slow, dragging pull of air, like something learning how to inhale for the first time, something that shouldn't have lungs at all. And every time I thought about the basement, my chest tightened, like something was pushing down on it from the inside. I sat on my couch until sunrise, still in uniform, hands shaking without permission. I told myself I would finish my shift, turn the report, and just try to forget the house on Piper Road. But I already knew I wouldn't forget, and I already knew I wasn't finishing any shift. When I got to the station the next morning, I could tell something was off. The whole place just felt wrong. Too quiet, too stiff. Cops don't usually make quiet spaces. We laugh too loud, talk too much, complain about everything. But when I walked in, heads dipped, conversations died. Someone muttered my name under their breath. I felt like I was walking around with a spotlight on my back. I thought maybe I looked worse than I realized. Maybe the bags under my eyes were deeper. Maybe the fear was just written all over my face. But then the lieutenant came out of his office, and the way he looked at me, it wasn't concern. It was irritation, almost fear. "Richards," he said, motioning me into the office. "We need to talk." I stepped inside, and the air felt heavy, like the room had been sealed shut overnight. He closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. I didn't. My nerves were too wired. My legs felt like they'd start shaking the moment I bent them. He let out a long, tired sigh and leaned back in his chair. "Let's go over your report from last night." I swallowed. "Yeah, sure." "You got a call at 2:17 a.m. Suspicious noises. Empty residence. No signs of forced entry. No suspect found. No victim. No property damage." He said it like he was reading a grocery list. So far normal. I nodded slowly. But then he said, tapping the page with his pen, "You added this section." He spun the report toward me. That's when I saw it. My handwriting, but not my words. Well, some were mine. The part about the house. The basement door cracked open. The temperature dropped. But the parts about the voice mimicking dispatch? Gone. The echoing footsteps behind me? Gone. The breathing? Gone. Instead, in neat, calm handwriting I never used, the report read, Officer likely experienced an auditory hallucination due to fatigue. No threat present. Requesting mental health checkup, but continuing duty. My mouth fell open. I didn't write that. The lieutenant's face stayed blank. Too blank. Richards, he said, folding his hands like he was practicing a calm teacher voice. Nobody is accusing you of anything. Stress causes things like this. No, I said, louder than I meant to. You don't understand. I didn't write that. That's not what I heard. Something was in that house. Something was... Stop. His voice cracked like a whip. Sharp. Quick. Look. I don't know what you think you heard last night, he said, leaning forward. But we're not starting rumors about supernatural crap or whatever story you're building in your head. We keep things clean. Understand? My heart thudded hard. You think I'm lying? No, he said. Too fast. I think you're tired. He pushed a small recorder toward me. The kind we use to back up radio traffic. This, he said, is a call from dispatch from last night. I need you to listen to it. My skin prickled. I didn't want to hear that tape again. Not after what I heard in the basement. But he pressed play before I could refuse. At first, it was exactly what I remembered. The dispatcher's calm voice. Unit 12, respond to 44 Piper Road. Static. Whined through the mic normal stuff. Then the breathing. But no, it wasn't the same. The breathing on the tape wasn't guttural or wrong or strained. It was soft, human, normal, like someone adjusting their headset. The lieutenant paused the tape. Sounds normal to me. No, I whispered. That's not what I heard. He hit the button again. And this time, I heard it, hidden under the dispatcher's voice, buried under the crackle of static. A second breath. Low, slow, wet. Just one. But one was enough. My skin crawled up my spine like a cold hand. I looked at him. You heard that? He didn't move, didn't blink. I didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Don't do that. I said, don't act like I'm crazy. There's something wrong with that house. There's something in that basement. Richards, calm down. You didn't hear the voice. You didn't hear it pretending to be dispatch. You didn't hear. He slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. I froze. My mouth snapped shut. The room felt too small suddenly. Too tight. He took a breath, rubbed his temple, and lowered his voice. Listen to me. You're a good cop, but if you write the truth the way you want to write it, you'll lose your badge. Do you understand? That should have scared me, but it didn't, because something else had started sinking in. He wasn't worried about my job. He was worried about something else getting out. I stepped back from the desk. Where's the full recording? That is the full recording. No, I said, there was more. I know there was more. Another cop knocked on the door. Hey, LT, you wanted the audio logs. The lieutenant stood, blocking me from the door. We'll handle it later. But I had already seen the box in the other cop's hands. Tapes, stacked and labeled by time. And one of them had a strip of red tape across the edge. Erased. I don't know what happened inside me. Something snapped loose. I shoved past the lieutenant, grabbed the box, and spilled the tapes across the floor. Labels flashed past my eyes. And there it was, 2:17 a.m., Piper Road, raw. But the reel inside, it was empty. Someone had opened it, taken the tape out, and rewound an empty spool. My breath caught in my throat. You erased it. The lieutenant grabbed my arm harder than he needed to. Richards, I'm telling you this as a friend. Drop it. Why? My voice shook. What did you hear on it? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. Whatever was on that tape scared him. He tried to pull me toward the door like he was escorting a drunk out of a bar, but I yanked my arm free. No, I said, I'm done lying. I'm done pretending. Something followed me out of that basement. The room went still, and then, somewhere in the hall, a radio crackled. Every head turned, and we heard it. A voice. My dispatcher's voice. But wrong. Dragged out. Slowed. Like someone stretching sounds they didn't fully understand. Unit 12. The lieutenant's face drained of color. Another voice layered under it. The breathing again. Closer. hungrier. Come back. The radio popped and went silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Finally, the lieutenant whispered, "Turn your radio in. Go home. Take time off. You were never at that house. You never heard that recording. And you never, ever repeat what happened today." I stared at him for a long time. Then I unhooked my radio, placed it on his desk, and said the only truth I had left. I quit. He didn't argue. He didn't try to stop me. He actually looked relieved, like the problem had removed itself from his hands. But the moment I stepped outside the station, a new problem hit me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voicemail. My throat tightened as I pressed play. Static crackled. Then breathing. Wet uneven. Too close to the mic. Then a voice, my dispatcher's voice, but shaped wrong. Bent. Wearing her tone like a costume. Unit 12. My eyes burned. My knees felt weak. "You forgot something." A long, shaky inhale filled the voicemail. "Not through human lungs. Come back." I ended the message and stood frozen on the sidewalk, feeling the cold morning air dig into my skin. I told myself I wouldn't. I told myself I was done. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that the breathing wasn't just coming from the phone. It was coming from behind me, right behind me, following, echoing, like whatever I heard in that basement, whatever they erased from that tape, wasn't trapped in that house anymore. It had found me, and it wasn't finished, not even close. I sat in my car, locked the doors, and tried to steady my shaking hands. But deep down, I understood something important. Quitting the force didn't save me. It only took away the people who could pretend nothing was wrong. Now it was just me, and the thing that knew my name, the thing that copied voices, the thing that wanted me back in that house. For the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. You can quit your job, you can quit your duties, but you can't quit a voice that knows how to follow you. And the breathing on the voicemail, it wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. I still remember the way the desert looked that night. Empty, dry, like the world had been scraped clean all the way down to the bone. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring because there's nothing left for them to hear. It was almost 2 a.m. when the call came in. A cruiser spotted out on Route 19, parked on the shoulder, engine running, lights still spinning in the dark. No radio traffic from the officer assigned to it. Normally, that wouldn't be a big deal. Maybe the guy pulled over to take a leak. Maybe he was dealing with something off the books. Maybe he just forgot a radio in. But the desert at night, it's not a place you stay in without a reason. When my sergeant told me to go check it out, I felt this small, stupid shiver crawl up my spine. I tried to ignore it. Told myself it was just a lack of sleep. Maybe the coffee wearing off. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. The desert doesn't hum at night. It doesn't move. It just waits. And something out there had been waiting for me. The drive felt longer than usual. Maybe because I kept checking my mirrors every few seconds. The highway behind me looked like an endless black throat swallowing the moonlight. Ahead of me, the cruiser lights tore the darkness like 2 red claws. When I finally pulled up behind it, the scene didn't make sense. The cruiser was running. Driver's side door open. Radio hissing with soft static. Headlights on full beam, aimed at nothing but sand, but no officer. I stepped out of my car and the heat hit me first. The kind that feels like someone holding a hand over your face. The engine of the abandoned cruiser hummed steady. A warm, living sound in the dead stillness of the desert. Unit 54, dispatch. I said into my radio. I'm at the scene. Cruiser is here. I don't see Officer Mills. My voice felt too loud in the quiet. Dispatch answered quick. Copy, 54. Is he injured? Don't know yet, I said. I'm checking. I held the radio close, just in case. The first thing I noticed was the footprints. Only one set, leading away from the driver's door and out into sand. The wind had already softened the edges, but they were still clear enough to follow. No second set, no signs of struggle. Just one man walking deeper into nothing. I leaned into the cruiser. The air inside was still warm from a body that must have been sitting there not too long ago. The seatbelt hung loose. The officer's coffee cup sat in the holder, still half full. Steam gone. Smell faint. And then the thing that froze me where I stood. The radio mic was off the hook, lying on the floor, as if someone dropped in a hurry, or let it slip while being pulled out of the car. The hair on my arms rose up. My mouth went dry. "Dispatch," I whispered. His radio mic is down. No visual on the officer. Static answered me first. Then her voice. "Do you need backup?" I wanted to say yes. I really did. But something about the scene felt fragile, like if too many people showed up at once, it would break open into something worse. I'll check the area," I said. "Stand by." I followed the footprints. Every step felt heavier than the one before. The sand crunched softly under my boots. The sound swallowed almost instantly by the open desert. The cruiser's lights faded behind me until they looked like two tiny, floating sparks. The prints led straight, no hesitation, like Mills had been walking toward something, or maybe away from something. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The air cooled suddenly, dropping a few degrees in the span of seconds. My breath wasn't visible, but it felt heavier in my throat. And the silence, God, the silence felt alive. I kept thinking I heard something behind me. Not footsteps exactly, more like dragging, something slow, something patient. Whenever I turned around, there was nothing but the cruiser glowing in the distance. But the sound didn't stop. It just slipped out of reach. A few minutes later, the footprints changed. Instead of deep and steady, they became lighter, shorter, like Mills started speeding up, almost jogging. And then there was a scuff mark, like he stumbled. I crouched and ran my fingers through the disturbed sand. It still felt warm from the day's heat, but something colder lingered under it, like shadow trapped inside the ground. My radio crackled softly. Unit 54 report. Dispatch's voice came through broken, fuzzy, like a bad signal. I raised my radio. I'm still on foot, following prints. Static swallowed half my words. This wasn't normal. Not out here, not this close to the road. The radio should have been crystal clear, but it wasn't. Something else was in the signal. A soft hum, too low for real static, almost like breathing. I lowered the radio fast. The trail continued another 20 feet, and then it stopped, just like that. No turning around, no collapse into the sand, no sign he doubled back. The footprints just ended. It was like Mills walked right out of the world. I stood there staring at the final print. It was so clean, so sharp, like it had been pressed into the earth with careful intention. I felt something tighten in my chest, a cold pressure, like invisible fingers closing around my ribs. I spun around. The desert stretched in every direction, silent, open, empty, except it didn't feel empty anymore. I could feel something watching me, not from the distance, from close, too close. I took a step backward. The ground behind me shifted, not like sand moving under boots, more like something rising under the surface. I froze. The sand bulged slightly, like a bubble pushing up from below, only for a second. Then it sank back down, smooth as before. My heart hammered hard enough to hurt. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. I heard the soft dragging sound again, but this time it was clearer, closer, not from behind, not from ahead, from beneath me, like something moving under the sand, slow, heavy, keeping pace with my breathing. I backed up fast, nearly tripping over my own boots. The ground stayed still now, like nothing had happened at all. But that didn't fool me. Something was under there, something big enough to shift the earth, something that wanted Mills, something that noticed me. I grabbed my radio again. "Dispatch! Send backup now. Officer is missing. Possible unknown threat." The radio hissed, then clicked. "Back. 54, say again." But her voice warped halfway through, stretched, like someone else was speaking through her, like two voices layered together. My grip tightened so hard the mic creaked. I didn't answer. I just ran. The cruiser lights looked like salvation as I got closer. But even then, something felt off. The air near the vehicle felt denser, heavy, like humidity without wetness. And the interior light, I swear it flickered. I reached the door and stopped. The driver's seat was still warm, too warm, like someone had been sitting there seconds ago. And the radio, it wasn't hissing anymore. Someone had picked up the mic, placed it neatly back in the cradle. My stomach dropped. I looked around the desert fast, scanning every shadow, every dip in the sand. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but inside the cruiser's radio, something exhaled. Long, slow, soft. I stepped back in the car, heart punching my ribs. That was not Officer Mills. Something else touched that radio. Something that knew how to mimic breath. Something that climbed back into the cruiser without leaving footprints. I backed up until I reached my patrol car, but I didn't take my eyes off the abandoned cruiser. Its headlights flickered once. Just once. Like someone blinked from the driver's seat. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. I opened my door, jumped inside, and hit the lock button. My hand shook on the wheel. I couldn't stop staring at the silhouette of the empty cruiser. And then, right before I drove away, its radio clicked on one last time. A voice whispered through static. Not Mills. Not dispatch. Something lower. Hungrier. Don't leave. I floored the gas, so hard my tires spit sand. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed distance. But the whole drive back, I kept checking the mirrors. Every few minutes I swore I saw a second pair of headlights following me far behind. 2 faint circles floating in the dark. They never got closer. They never vanished. They just stayed there, dragging across the desert like eyes that learn how to follow. And I knew, even before I reached the station, that Officer Mills wasn't the only one being hunted now. Something out there marked me, and it wasn't finished. I didn't sleep when I got home that night. Couldn't. My head was full of that breathing on the radio, that soft, slow inhale like something was trying to learn the rhythm of human lungs. I sat in my kitchen with all the lights on, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee I never even drank. My mind kept replaying the last thing I saw before leaving the desert. The faint circles of headlights far behind me, drifting like 2 glowing eyes. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Heat reflection, dust, my own nerves messing with me. But yeah, I didn't believe that. Not even a little. By sunrise, my shirt smelled like fierce sweat and exhaustion, and my eyes felt like I'd rubbed sand in them. But I drove back to the station anyway, telling myself I had to report what happened. When I pulled into the lot, I noticed 4 patrol cars parked in a loose circle around an empty space. At first, I wondered if something else had happened, if the desert had taken someone else. But no, they were waiting for me. Sergeant Rowe walked over the moment I stepped out of my car. He looked pissed, but also worried, like I'd brought something back with me. "You didn't answer your phone," he said. "Where the hell were you?" "I went home," I said. "I just needed time to think." "Think about what?" I didn't have the words, not ones that made sense out loud. He sighed. "Get in the truck. We're heading back to the cruiser site. There's something you need to see." My stomach dropped. Something new. Rowe didn't answer. He just climbed into his truck. That told me enough. The entire drive back, I watched the desert roll by in that pale morning light. You'd think the sun would make things feel safer, warmer. But the desert in daylight has a different kind of silence. A dead silence. Like everything living decided to hide underground. We pulled off the road near the same stretch where I found Mills' cruiser. The other deputies were already there, standing in a wide circle around the sand near the vehicle. Their faces all held the same expression. Uneasy, confused, scared to admit what they were seeing. I stepped out slowly, almost afraid that walking too fast would wake something up. The cruiser looked exactly the same as before. Engine off now. Door closed. Dust already settling back over the windows. But that wasn't what everyone was looking at. They were staring at the ground. And when I got close enough to see, my stomach flipped. Footprints. Hundreds of them. Not scattered. Not random. A perfect ring circling the cruiser. Over and over. Layer upon layer. Like someone or something walked around the car again and again until the sand compacted into a shallow trench. My throat tightened. The prints weren't spaced evenly. Some steps were long, others short, like whoever made them was changing pace, speeding up, slowing down. At one point they crossed over themselves so many times the sand looked churned, but they never wandered off, never strayed in any direction but around the cruiser, like something pacing a cage or circling prey. Sergeant Rowe finally spoke. These weren't here last night. I swallowed hard. I know. You didn't make these, he said. No. And you're sure Mills didn't? He never walked around the car. His prints went straight into the desert and ended. You saw the report. Rowe rubbed the back of his neck. He looked older in the sunlight. Then who the hell did this? I didn't answer because the truth was pressing against my ribs like something sharp tried breakout. It wasn't a who. It felt like a what. I crouched down and examined one of the prints. The shape bothered me immediately. Yes, it looked like a boot, about a size 10, shred pattern similar to ours. But the depth was wrong. Some steps were shallow, normal. Others sank deep, like the weight behind them shifted. Not like a human moving normally, like something wearing human footsteps. I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I followed the ring around the cruiser. The sand crunched under my boots, and each time I stepped next to one of the prints, I compared depth, spacing, pattern. They never left the circle, never once broke the loop. But the part that chilled me most, toward the back of the cruiser. The prints suddenly stopped. Just stopped. One moment. A deep, perfect boot mark. The next, smooth, untouched sand. Like whoever made them didn't walk away. Just blinked out. I crouched there longer than I meant to, staring at that final print. The edges were sharp, recent, so recent the wind hadn't had time to soften them. It doesn't make sense, Deputy Harlow muttered behind me. People don't just disappear like that. But something about his voice sounded like he was trying to convince himself, not us. I closed my eyes for a moment, and in that silence, I felt again, that pressure under the sand, that slow, dragging weight moving somewhere beneath the surface. It felt like it was listening, watching, waiting. The back of my neck prickled like cold fingers were trailing over it. When Rowe called my name, I flinched so hard he stepped back like I was about to swing at him. You good? He asked. Not even close. Yeah, I lied. Just tired. He didn't buy that, but he didn't push either. Instead, he pointed toward the far side of the cruiser. You need to see the other thing. My chest tightened. Other thing? I walked around the car until I saw what he meant. There, scratched faintly into the dust on the rear passenger door, were marks. Long, thin, uneven lines. Not deep enough to be made by a knife. Too shaky to be from a key. Almost like fingernails dragging lightly down the metal. Or parallel streaks. Not 3. Not 5. 4. The exact number you'd see if a hand pressed against a car, but with one finger missing. I stared at those marks for a long time. Wind. Deputy Harlow offered weakly. Rowe shot him a look. Wind doesn't make straight lines. Neither do animals. Not like this. I traced the air just above the scratches. Something about them felt wrong. Like whoever, or whatever, made them was testing the metal. Testing the boundary. Testing us. And then I noticed something else. The scratches were on the inside of the dust layer, meaning the dust settled on top afterward, meaning they were made before sunrise, meaning something had been touching the cruiser. While I was driving home thinking I'd escaped whatever was out here, my mouth went dry. I whispered without meaning to. It followed me. Rowe heard. What? It wasn't finished. I said, whatever happened to Mills, it's not done. A thick quiet settled over everyone. No one wanted to be the first to break it. Finally, Rowe cleared his throat. Look, he said, I'm not jumping to any supernatural nonsense, but something's off. Something dangerous. We're calling in state police. Maybe search and rescue. Deputy Harlow muttered. Search for what? Ghost prints. Rowe shot him a glare that shut him up immediately. He turned back to me. You were the last one here last night. Did you see anyone? Hear anything? Anything at all? I thought of the breathing. The low hum bleeding through Dispatch's voice. The way the sand bulged under my feet, like something alive was moving beneath it. But all I said was, I heard something weird on the radio. Weird how? Like, like someone else was on the line. Roe frowned. You think someone spoofed the frequency? I shook my head. No, it wasn't a voice. Not a real one. More like something trying to make one. He stared at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe me or send me home to sleep. But before he could say anything, the wind picked up for the first time that morning. It wasn't a normal desert breeze. It was cold, unnaturally cold. We all turned as sand lifted and twisted through the air. It stung my face, but when I squinted through the dust, I saw something that made my chest lock tight. The footprints. The endless ring around the cruiser. The wind blew right over them, hard enough to lift small rocks. But the prints didn't fade, not even a little. The sand refused to move. Like something heavy was still pressing down from beneath. A shadow passed under the surface. A slow ripple, like a shape sliding just below the top layer of earth. Deputy Harlow swore and stumbled back. Roe grabbed his gun, out of pure instinct. My hand flew to mine too, but something deep inside me whispered, "Don't. Guns don't mean anything to what's under there." We all froze as the ripple drifted around the cruiser, following the same path as the footprints. The same circle. The same slow, steady pace. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it faded. The wind collapsed. Silence dropped again. But the feeling it left behind, the pressure, the tension, the sense of being watched from underground, stayed heavy in the air. Roe turned to me, voice low. "You weren't imagining it last night." I said nothing. He looked at the still perfect footprints around the cruiser. "Whatever walked here," he whispered, "is still here." My eyes stayed locked on the sand beneath my feet. And for the first time since I joined the force, I felt truly small. Not afraid of death. Afraid of being noticed. Because whatever was moving under that desert, it wasn't hunting Mills. He was just the first one who stepped too close. The first one who looked down at the wrong moment. And now it was circling us, learning us, marking us. And somehow, deep in my bones, I knew the truth. It didn't walk away because it didn't need to. It was waiting. And sooner or later, it would come back to finish what it started. I didn't even want to see the footage. I kept saying that to myself the whole way back to the station, like some dumb little prayer I knew wouldn't save me. But the chief insisted. "You found the cruiser," he said. "You review anything tied to it. Those were the rules. And when you're a deputy out in a desert county nobody even remembers on the map, rules are the only thing that pretend to keep us safe." Still, something in me felt like I was walking toward a cliff. Like once I saw what was on that dash cam, a part of me wouldn't come back. The room was cold when I stepped inside. Always too cold in evidence. Even the hum of the lights sounded nervous. Officer Jensen, our tech guy, was already sitting at the computer, elbows on the desk, staring at the monitor like he was trying to hypnotize himself into quitting. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. He clicked a few things, fast and sharp, like he just wanted it over with. Then he pressed play, and there it was, the last few hours of Officer Morales, the guy whose cruiser we found idling in the desert, door open, radio still hissing like it was whispering secrets. At first, the footage looked normal, just inside of the cruiser, the dark outline of the road, the faint glow of the dash lights. But something already felt wrong. I didn't know why yet. I just felt in the base of my spine, the way animals sense a storm long before the sky changes. Morales was in the frame, sitting in the driver's seat, hands at 10 and 2, breathing slow. Too slow, like he was forcing each breath, like every inhale was being counted by something other than him. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m. I remember that number because when I found the cruiser, the clock inside read the exact same time, like it had frozen, like the car itself didn't want to move forward. "Volume's up," Jensen whispered. I didn't know why he whispered, but the moment he did, I felt myself do the same inside my own chest. Like speaking normally would be disrespectful to whatever was about to crawl across the screen. Static whispered under Morales' breathing. Then he spoke. I hear you," he said. My heart dropped because the cruiser was empty. The footage showed no one else. No passenger. No silhouette. Not even a shadow leaning in through the window. but he was talking to something. Something the camera didn't catch. "What do you need?" Morales asked next, voice shaking. I felt my fingers curl into my palms. I didn't even notice I was doing it until my nails hurt. "Pause," I said quietly. "Go back 10 seconds. Jensen obeyed. I leaned in, eyes glued to the screen, trying to see something, anything, besides Morales talking into empty air. But the seat was empty, the windows clear. The mirror reflected only darkness. Nothing. The dash cam didn't glitch, didn't flicker, didn't distort. It was almost too clean, like the camera itself refused to record whatever had been there. Jensen hit play again. Morales swallowed, then nodded toward the empty seat like he was being told a secret. "No," he said softly. "I'm not supposed to leave the car." His eyes flicked to the door, then the window, then down to his boots. He was listening to someone, or something, and whatever it was, it didn't whisper like a person. The audio picked up small sounds, too small, too faint for words, but they weren't human tones. They were breaths, dry ones, slow ones, like something that didn't have lungs was practicing how to pretend. Cold washed through my stomach. "I don't think we should see this," I whispered. Jensen didn't answer. His jaw was tight. He looked like he wanted to back away, but the chair had swallowed him whole. On screen, Morales leaned closer to the empty passenger seat. "Okay," he said finally. His voice cracked. Then he opened the cruiser door. The camera angle didn't change. But the moment he stepped out, the desert wind hit the mic, soft and warm, like a sigh. He stood outside the cruiser, half in and half out of the frame. The dash cam only showed his left arm and shoulder, but I could see him turning his head, like he was tracking something slow moving in the dark. His breathing got louder and the mic stiff. Didn't even sound like a person anymore. More like an animal cornered but trying not to show fear. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then he said it. The sentence I swear I will hear in my head until I die. "I can't see you," he whispered. "Can you step closer?" I stopped breathing. On the recording, there was a sound, a very soft shuffle, like bare feet brushing sand. But the camera showed nothing. Absolutely nothing. Morales' head lifted a little. Then his expression changed. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like he suddenly understood what he had been talking to this whole time. He stepped back. Then again, his hand went to his holster. But he didn't draw. He looked stiff, frozen, like something invisible held his wrists. "Don't," he whispered. Another shuffle. Closer this time. And then, I swear this happened. The car itself reacted. The dash cam flickered, but not like a glitch. More like something moved through the air, so close to the car that the camera tried to refocus on something it couldn't understand. Morales gasped. Then he spun toward the open desert and ran straight into the darkness, right out of frame. And that was it. The dash cam kept recording for several hours. Just the empty seat, empty road, empty desert, the engine humming, the wind breathing, nothing else. But the moment Morales vanished, Jensen hit pause, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Where's the part you said was weird?" I asked. My voice fell hoarse, too thin to be mine. "This isn't the weird part," he said. Then he clicked a folder on the desktop. A video file with no timestamp, no label, just an icon. "I didn't recover this," he whispered. "It was already in the dash cam, hidden, like it was added." My stomach went cold. Added by who? He didn't answer. He just clicked. The video opened. Static. A thick, heavy kind of static, like the camera was underwater. Then a shape emerged. A seat. Morales' seat, but from a different angle. Too low, too close, like the camera sat on the floor. And something else. Breathing. Not human breathing. It was deep and wet and slow, like someone dragging mud through their lungs. Something moved in front of the lens, too close to be clear. Pale, smooth, then it pulled back, and I realized I was staring at the outline of a face. But the proportions were wrong. The jaw too long, the forehead too smooth, the head tilted at an angle no living person could bend. It stared at the seat like it was studying it. Then it turned turned directly toward the camera. I didn't see eyes. I saw shapes where I should have been. Dark shapes. Too dark for the lighting in the car. Two pits in its face that seemed to pull the picture inward. The thing leaned closer. The lens bent slightly like the camera tried to recoil. The breathing got louder, heavier, hungry. Then the thing spoke, not in words, in the same rhythm as Morales' voice from earlier, like it was imitating him, replaying him, like a kid repeating a line I heard but didn't understand. "I hear you," it croaked. My hand shot to my stomach. I thought I might throw up. The thing tilted its head, waiting, then it said one more thing. The same words Morales had whispered into the dark just before he ran. "Can you step closer?" The screen went black. The room stayed silent for almost a full minute. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My hands felt numb. "That file wasn't supposed to exist," Jensen said finally. His voice was barely there. "That angle isn't even real. That camera is installed in any cruiser." I swallowed hard. "So, someone edited it?" He shook his head. "Look at the metadata," he whispered. He clicked again. A panel opened, and my blood went cold, because the file wasn't edited, wasn't copied, wasn't downloaded. It was recorded live on the cruiser. Timestamp, 3:17 a.m., the exact minute the car froze, the exact minute Morales disappeared. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. He looked at me with tired, terrified eyes. "Because nobody would believe me," he said. "And because whatever recorded this wasn't human, and it didn't want to be seen." My throat tightened, and now we've watched it. He nodded. For a moment, all I could hear was my own pulse. Loud, fast, angry. "Delete it," I whispered. "Delete everything. Burn the backups. I don't ever want to." The screen flickered. Static. Then a shape, lean, pale, briefly appeared in the corner of the frozen frame, watching us. Then gone. I stepped back so fast the chair hit the wall. Jensen didn't breathe, didn't blink. "Do you think it knows we saw it?" he whispered. I didn't answer, because the truth was already sinking into my bones. It knew. It wanted us to see. And now it wasn't going to leave us alone. I got the call just as the sun was bleeding its last light across the river. "A boy lost." That's all the dispatcher said at first. Just a few clipped words before the line went quiet. I sat in my cruiser for a moment, listening to the wind scrape against the metal roof, wondering how a kid could get lost out here. The bridge wasn't long. There weren't any woods to speak of, just the river curling beneath the old iron beams, the dark water swallowing whatever it touched. Still, they said he'd been seen standing there, staring at the river, muttering the same sentence over and over. I drove slow, letting my headlights cut through the early evening haze. The town was small, the streets narrow, and by the time I hit the cracked asphalt of the road leading to the bridge, the world had started to hush itself into night. I could feel the quiet pressing against my chest, heavy and expectant. I thought about my own kid for a second, my daughter, sleeping somewhere, probably dreaming about cartoons or the stupid little dramas of her day. I didn't want to imagine her here, alone. The bridge came into view, just a thin line of metal stretching over the river. And there he was, standing there, small, shaking, hair plastered his forehead by sweat or rain. I couldn't tell. He looked like he didn't belong, like he had walked out of another world into mine. He kept saying it, soft like a chant, and the words slid past me in the dark, echoing against the steel girders. "They're watching me," he said, over and over. "They're watching me." I stopped the cruiser and killed the engine. The sound of the motor fading felt too loud in the empty evening. My boots crunch against gravel as I walked toward him. Flashlight cutting a thin line of yellow across the asphalt. I called out softly, "Hey, buddy, it's okay. I'm a police officer. You're safe now." He didn't answer me. He just kept repeating it, faster now, almost frantic. The light from my flashlight danced across his face, and I could see it then, the black rings under his eyes, the way his fingers clawed at the railing, knuckles white. My stomach went cold. There was something in him that wasn't just fear. It was like he was trying to warn me. "Who's watching you?" I asked, voice low. The wind picked up then, carrying a taste of metal. The river churning on the bridge. The shadows of the girders stretching and twitching. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer to the edge, small and trembling. I froze, my heart thudding. Hey, don't move. Stay right there. It's stupid, I know, but part of me wanted to step back. Something in the way he said the words, so mechanical, so rehearsed, made my skin crawl. I reached out, careful, and touched his shoulder. The second my hand made contact, he flinched violently, spinning around to face me, wide-eyed, almost screaming. The words changed then, like a broken record skipping forward. Don't look, don't look, don't look. I blinked, startled. It was just a kid, a small kid, but the darkness around him seemed to pulse, heavy and alive, like it was breathing along with him. I wanted to take a step back, but I couldn't. My legs felt anchored to the asphalt, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Hey, buddy, look at me. Just me. I swallowed hard. My voice sounded strange, too loud in the quiet. Who's watching you? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, blank, then whispered, almost drowned by the wind. There in the water, there in the shadows. The hair on my neck stood up. I wanted to say it was nonsense, just a kid's imagination. But something in the way he said it, so certain, so desperate, made me doubt myself. The river beneath us gurgled, black and endless. I shined my flashlight across the water, scanning for anything, logs, rocks, reflections. Nothing, just a river, silent, cold. I tried again. Hey, come on, let's get off the bridge, okay? I kept my voice soft, coaxing. I took another step closer, and then he moved. Not toward me, not towards safety, but along the edge of the railing, following it like a thread in a tapestry, careful, precise. I felt panic rise, unnatural, gnawing. My training screamed at me. Stay calm, don't spook him, but my gut twisted in knots. He was small, but he had a presence that felt wrong. Do you live around here? I asked, my hand still hovering near his shoulder. The boy stopped, tilted his head, as if listening to someone I couldn't hear. No one lives here. No one, he said. Then, almost like an afterthought, he whispered, but they come sometimes. They watch. I shook my head. Who comes? He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the river, small finger quivering. Down there, always down there, waiting. I forced myself to follow his gaze. I stared at the black water for a long, long time, but saw nothing. Nothing that belonged to this world. At least, my pulse quickened, ears straining to catch any movement, any sound. But the only thing was the wind, the river, the hollow creak of the bridge. Then he whispered again. They want me to tell them to tell you. I froze. My mind tried to catch up. Tell me what? My throat went dry. Tell me what, buddy? I asked, trying to sound calm. He shook his head, frantic now. I can't. They'll take me. I took another step closer. No one's gonna take you. You're safe with me. The boy laughed then. It wasn't a normal laugh. High-pitched, brittle, almost like it cracked the air. Safe, he said. There's no safe. There's no... He stopped. He jerked backward, nearly toppling over the railing. My reflexes kicked in, and I grabbed his arm just in time. The second I touched him, the air shifted. Not the wind, not the river. Something else. My stomach dropped. The darkness around us seemed thicker, heavier, like it pressed against my chest. My flashlight flickered, and I could swear the shadows moved just slightly at the corners of my vision. The boy's face turned pale. He started muttering again, words I couldn't understand, sounds that weren't quite human. I stepped back, pulling him with me, trying to get him away from the edge. But the moment we moved, the whisper stopped. Silence. Absolute silence. I looked down at him, trying to anchor myself, to anchor him. His eyes were wide, trembling, unblinking. You have to leave, he said finally. They'll... Before he could finish, a splash came from the water below. My heart jumped. I shone my flashlight over the side. Nothing, just ripples, fading into darkness. I felt my hand shaking, my breath coming short. And the boy, he just stared at me, calm now, too calm. "They know you're here," he said softly. "They always know." I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. I wanted to take him, bring him back to my cruiser, get answers from him in the safety of the light. But there was something in his voice that stopped me, something ancient, patient, and terrible. I reached for my radio, hands trembling, and called it in. "Dispatch, I've got a boy at the bridge, lost, repeating something. I need backup." Static crackled back. Then the dispatcher's voice. Clear, normal, too normal. "Copy that. Units on the way." I glanced at the boy. He tilted his head, listening, and then whispered, almost himself, "No one's coming. They never come." I wanted to argue, wanted to convince him, but I couldn't. There was a certainty in his voice that chilled me to the bone. I shined my flashlight back on the water. The river didn't look the same. Shadows clung to the surface, dark and alive, and I realized I wasn't sure where the water ended and the dark began. I looked down at the boy again. He wasn't moving now, just staring at me, eyes too old for a child. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Not yet. Not like this." I swallowed. The bridge creaked. The wind picked up again. And for a moment, I saw something. Movement under the water. Something that didn't belong. Following, patient, waiting. I reached for him again, but he slipped from my grip. Not running, not falling, just gone. My flashlight caught nothing but the empty railing, the black water, the whispering wind. I ran my hands through my hair, cursed under my breath. My radio crackled. "Officer?" I looked around. The boy was gone. The bridge was empty. Only the river and the dark remained. And I could still hear him, just barely whispering, echoing in my mind. "They're watching me, always watching." I didn't know if I had imagined it. I wanted to tell myself I had, but I couldn't. That night, on that bridge, I saw something I couldn't explain. And I knew I wasn't supposed to. I stepped into the cabin and felt the air thicken immediately, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The door creaked shut behind me, and for a moment I froze, listening. My boots echoed on the wooden floor, hollow, uneven. The place smelled of rot, of old wood and something metallic, faint but unmistakable. I glanced at my partner, who gave a small, tense nod. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were here for a missing person call. Kids. That's all the dispatcher had said before the line went dead. Nothing about who or why. Only the coordinates. The cabin. Abandoned for years. Or at least that's what the town record said. The first room was empty. Just dust and broken furniture. A shattered chair lay against the wall. Splinters catching the weak light from our flashlights. I ran my fingers along the counter. Thick dust. Like no one had touched this place in decades. Still, something felt recent. Almost too recent. I stepped into the second room and froze. Small shoes. Children's shoes. Dozens of them, nailed to the ceiling. Each pair perfectly aligned, the leather cracked and faded, toes pointing down like frozen little prayers. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. Who would do this? I whispered, voice barely audible. My partner shook his head, jaw tight, flashlight sweeping across the walls. There was more. Tiny handprints pressed into plaster, high above, like a child had climbed there, and then scratches, shallow but deliberate, running along the beams. I felt my throat tighten. Something about the way the shoes hung, like they were watching, waiting, made me step back. But my boot struck a loose board, a soft thunk that echoed in the room. I could have sworn I heard a quiet shuffle above me, faint, like tiny feet tapping. But when I looked up, there was nothing. The cabin was small, one story. But the shadows seemed thicker than they had any right to be. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath, hitting it against my palm. The shadows didn't just shift. They seemed to stretch, following the light, moving in ways that made no sense. We moved cautiously toward the back, toward a door that was locked from the inside. No key, no knob, just a heavy iron latch. I crouched, examined the wood. It was old, swollen from years of moisture, but there were scratches here, too, deep and jagged. Not animal. Human, I thought. Maybe a child. Maybe someone trying to escape. I tapped on the door. Hollow sound. Then I heard it. A soft giggle. High-pitched, distant, almost playful. My stomach dropped. I swallowed and called out, "Hello? Anybody in there?" My voice shook. The cabin swallowed it. No answer. Only the sound of our own breathing. I tried the door again. Locked. Solid. I ran my hand along the latch. Cold. Too cold. My skin prickled. I felt like the air around me was alive, moving with intent, pressing against me. Then I saw it, in the corner of my eye, a shadow that didn't belong. I swung the flashlight, heart hammering. Nothing, just a peeling wallpaper. The dust motes dancing in the beam. I blinked. When I looked again, there was something there. Something small, crouched near the ceiling. Tiny hands gripping a beam. Eyes black, watching. I swallowed, voice shaking. "Who's there? Show yourself." Silence. Then the scratching started. Faint at first, like nails on wood. I froze. My partner's flashlight caught movement in the corner. Something moving along the wall. Too fast, too small, vanishing before I could focus. I backed up. My flashlight fell on the ceiling, and I saw more shoes. They weren't just nailed randomly. They formed a pattern, spiraling inward, pointing toward the locked door. My stomach clenched. It felt like they were leading me somewhere, pushing me closer, daring me to open that door. The scratching grew louder, almost urgent. I could hear whispering now, soft, overlapping voices, indistinct, coming from the other side of the door. "Let us out. Let us play. Come closer." I stumbled back, heart racing. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. My partner nodded, pale, mouth tight. He didn't speak. Neither of us moved. I knelt by the door, trying to peer under the crack at the bottom. Darkness. Thick black, like it absorbed the flashlight's beam. But there was movement. Tiny fingers brushing against the wood, dragging, pulling. Something wanted out. Something small. Hungry. I couldn't think straight. My hands were sweating, but I tried the latch again. Solid. I hit it with my flashlight. Nothing. The whispers became clearer, more insistent, overlapping, chanting. I backed away, shaking my head, trying to breathe. The shoes above me seemed to sway, faintly, as if someone or something had just passed overhead. My hair stood on end. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my instincts pushed me forward. Someone, children, might still be trapped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I called the dispatcher. "We're at the cabin. Something's wrong. Locked room in the back. Possible children trapped." Static, then a voice. Not the dispatcher. Not human. High warped, twisting around itself. "You shouldn't be here." I dropped the phone, heart racing. My partner grabbed my arm. "We need to leave. Now." I glanced back at the door. The whispering had stopped. The scratching stopped. Silence. But I could feel it, heavy in my chest, pressing, waiting. I looked up at the ceiling again. The shoes. The way they were arranged. The pattern. I realized then they weren't pointing inward. They were pointing at me. I backed toward the exit. Stumbling over broken boards, my partner close behind. The air felt thick, sticky, like the cabin itself was breathing, alive. I could hear the faint giggle again, right behind me. Though when I spun around, there was nothing. We reached the door. I yanked it open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rot, water, and something else. Something metallic, sharp. I stepped outside, sunlight fading, shadows stretching. I didn't dare look back. I want to call it in to get help, but my phone was dead. Dead like the cabin wanted it that way. My partner didn't speak, just nodded toward the trees, toward the road. I followed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shoes, spinning above me, fingers brushing the door, tiny voices whispering. I kept hearing that high-pitched giggle, like a memory stuck in my skull, teasing, taunting. And I kept thinking about the locked room, about what we didn't open, about the small hands and black eyes I saw just for a moment. Something told me they were still there, waiting, watching. I kept seeing the pattern, spiraling, pointing at me, and I knew somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that the cabin wasn't abandoned at all. Not really. Not ever. And maybe it never would be. I found a map tucked behind a loose panel in the sheriff's office, yellowed and curling at the edges, like it had been waiting for someone to notice it for decades. I didn't know why my hands shook when I touched it. Maybe because it smelled of damp paper, mildew, something long buried, or maybe because the idea of tunnels beneath our town made the skin on my arms crawl. The map showed a maze of lines, narrow corridors winding beneath streets I knew, under old houses, beneath the river in places. Most of them were marked with tiny annotations in faded ink: collapse, danger, mine, do not enter. I traced one with my finger. The lines twisted and turned, looping back in impossible ways, like the town above had nothing to do with the world below. I remember feeling a sudden weight on my chest, like the room itself had drawn a deep breath and was holding it. The idea of people walking, hiding, living down there decades ago made me shiver. I tried to laugh, nervously, telling myself it was just old mining tunnels, ghost stories, nothing more. But the more I studied the map, the more I realized how precise it was, how much someone must have known. Someone had walked those tunnels, and maybe some of them never came back. I went to the entrance the map indicated. A collapsed building on the outskirts of town, its windows boarded, walls sagging. The smell hit me first. Earth, decay, and something metallic, wet and old. I touched the boards, my fingers sticky with mold and dust, prying them back enough to slip inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight, echoing in the empty shell. My flashlight cut through the gloom, bouncing off rusted nails and peeling paint. Then I saw it, the stairwell leading down. Narrow concrete, slick with years of water and grime. I swallowed hard, heart thudding, and started down. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself resisted my descent. The smell intensified, iron, wet dirt, old coal. My flashlight reflected off the walls, revealing faded markings, arrows, numbers, almost like someone had tried to guide their way through in the dark. The tunnels weren't small enough to feel safe, but they weren't large either. Just enough room to move single file, walls pressing close, dripping water making little pools in the uneven floor. I tried to imagine what would have been like decades ago. Miners carrying lanterns, picks in hand, sweat running down their faces, their breaths echoing against the low ceilings. My own breaths bounced back at me, uneven, hollow, sounding wrong somehow, like the walls swallowed some of the sound and twisted it. I followed the map for a while, stepping carefully, flashlight catching the occasional rusted pipe or wooden beam. And then I found them, faint footprints in the dust, small ones, children sizes, mixed with adult prints. My stomach sank. I knelt to, examined them. They were old, yes, but something about their arrangement, like someone had walked in patterns, circles, over and over, felt deliberate, ritualistic almost. I pressed forward, deeper. The tunnel curved sharply, then opened into a larger chamber. I switched on my flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Old carts, broken wheels, abandoned tools. And in the corner, a pile of rubble, as if someone had tried to hide something or someone. The air grew colder, denser. I could hear water dripping somewhere, far, but the sound carried oddly, like it had been amplified, bouncing off walls in ways that made my head spin. I stepped closer to the rubble, my boots crunching softly. Something moved, just a shadow in the corner of my vision. I spun my flashlight, heart hammering, and saw nothing, just shadows. But the feeling stayed, the weight of eyes pressing from the darkness, watching patient. I forced myself to keep moving. I needed to know what these tunnels were for, who had used them, and why. The map suggested they ran under the old mills, the town's outskirts, even near the river, places that had been sealed for decades. The thought that someone could still be down here, alive, made my pulse spike. I tried to reason with myself. It had to be abandoned. It had to be. Then I saw markings on the wall. Fresh, deep scratches, not old, not decades. I froze, shining the light across them. They spelled letters, hasty, uneven, but readable. Do not follow. My breath hitched. My hand trembled as I traced the words. The scratches ended abruptly, just at the corner where the tunnel turned sharply. I swallowed. Something in me told me to leave. The logical part, my training, screamed at me, retreat. But curiosity, or maybe fear itself, pushed me forward. I rounded the corner. The tunnel narrowed again. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath. I tapped it, steadying the beam. That's when I noticed the echoes. My own footsteps sounded different. Not just echoes, but layered, like someone else was walking behind me, mimicking my steps, keeping the same pace. I stopped, heart hammering. Silence. Only the drip of water, the low hum of the tunnel. I move again, slower this time, each step deliberate. The sound followed. I stopped. It stopped. I turned sharply. Nothing. Darkness. Just a low, what smelled the chill, the oppressive quiet. I pressed on. The map showed a chamber ahead, marked with a star and the word vault. My imagination raced. What had been stored down here? Money? Smuggled goods? Or something far worse? The chamber door was steel, rusted but solid. I pushed it slowly, groaning, until it swung open with a hiss of metal. Inside, piles of rock and broken timber. But at the center, something caught my eye. A small circle of toys. Old toys. Dolls, blocks, wooden trains, all arranged carefully, as if waiting. My stomach churned. I shined the light around the room. The walls were etched with names, dozens of them, small, uneven letters, carved into the stone. Names of children? Dates. Years that didn't make sense. Some from the 50s, some more recent. My flashlight trembled in my hand. My mind reeled. Who had been down here? And why? A sound made me jump. A low, almost imperceptible giggle, echoing off the walls. I froze. Hello. My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the darkness. Silence. Then, again closer this time. A whisper. Help us. I felt my legs go cold. Something brushed past my arm. Not solid, not quite there, but a sensation like static against my skin. I spun around, flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing. Just shadows. But the smell, the metallic, wet smell had grown stronger, like something had been waiting in the darkness for me. I took a step back toward the door, trying to rationalize. My flashlight caught more markings, tiny handprints, smeared in dust, climbing the walls, leading toward the piles of rubble. I swallowed hard, heart racing. The room felt alive, breathing around me, closing in, pressing from all sides. I reached the door. My hand on the handle, I paused, listening. Faint footsteps, quick, small, retreating deeper into the tunnels. My breath caught. I wanted to follow, to see, but some instinct, deep and primal, stopped me. The walls seemed to pulse now, like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate. The tunnels themselves were alive, watching. I forced myself to step outside, into the narrow corridor. The chill hit me immediately, colder than it should have been. I traced my steps back along the tunnels, but the map in my hand seemed wrong. Paths I thought I knew twisted, doubled back, vanished. Every turn looked the same. Dust kicked up by my boots settled immediately, as if no one had disturbed it at all. The whispers followed, low now, more insistent. Go deeper, come back. My pulse thundered. I ran. My boots skidded on wet stone, flashlight beam bouncing, illuminating jagged walls, fallen beams, the occasional glint of something metallic. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted out. I burst from the stairwell into the collapsed building. The air outside never felt so good. The sun was gone, leaving only the last light of dusk, painting the world in gray. My partner was waiting, pale, flashlight shaking. I barely recognized him. "Did you see it?" he whispered. I nodded. We didn't speak again. Not yet. We climbed into the cruiser in silence, the engine roaring like a lifeline, tires crunching over gravel as we drove away. That night at home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tunnels, the toys, the handprints, the names, the whispers echoing. And I kept thinking about the map, the paths that didn't exist above ground, the lives buried beneath our town, hidden and forgotten. And I knew someone or something had been waiting down there, waiting for someone to come looking. And I had come looking. The ladder was old, iron, rusted and slick with moisture. I gripped it with both hands, feeling the cold bite into my gloves, the metal trembling under my weight. My partner followed behind me, flashlight sweeping over the walls, over the water pooling on the tunnel floor. The air was thick, heavy, and the smell of wet earth and something rotten made my stomach churn. We'd been following the tunnels deeper, farther than the map suggested, past collapsed shafts and broken beams. That's when we heard it. The breathing. At first, I thought it was the echo of our own movements. The wind in the corridors, water dripping somewhere far above. But then it changed. Low, wet, crowded, as if several people were breathing at once, pressed together in the dark, just beyond the light. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You hear that?" I whispered. My partner nodded, pale. "Yeah," he said. I don't like it." We moved slowly, trying to trace the sound. It was coming from above, somewhere along the ladder shaft we had discovered leading to a higher level. The steps groaned under our boots, the iron rattling faintly. I kept my grip tight, flashlight trembling. Each inhale from the tunnel sounded unnatural, layered, overlapping, almost too many for human lungs. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to reason. Tunnels, old mines, could be animals, could be water echoing strangely. But my gut told me otherwise. Something had been down here for a long time, watching, waiting, and whatever it wasn't alone. We reached the base of the ladder. The breathing was louder now, uneven, ragged, like a dozen people pressed into the same space, struggling. My partner shone his light up the ladder. Nothing. Empty rungs, blackness above. But the sound didn't stop. Up or back? I asked. My voice was tight, barely audible. He swallowed. We should see. We can't just leave it theirs. He trailed off. I knew what he meant. A child, a victim, someone trapped. I felt the pull too. But I also felt the weight of dread pressing on me. The instinct telling me to turn, run, and never come back. I started up the ladder, one step at a time. Each rung groaned under my weight, echoing like a warning. The breathing followed, shifting, sliding, as if the shadows above were moving closer. My flashlight shook, cutting a thin line into the darkness. Halfway up, I froze. Something moved. Not above, not below on the ladder itself. I could see it now, a shadow stretching over the rungs, clinging, crawling. It didn't have a shape I could recognize. Limbs too long, fingers too thin, elbows bending the wrong way. But it moved with purpose, climbing toward us. My stomach dropped. "Holy," I whispered. My partner grabbed my ankle from below. "Don't look," he hissed. But I couldn't stop. My eyes were locked on it. The shadows shifted, almost human for a second, then grotesque, twitching, crawling, its head tilting unnaturally as it followed the ladder, faster than it should have been able to move. The breathing, it multiplied. Not just the thing on the ladder. Behind it, echoes, more breaths than should exist, overlapping, pressing into my ears. My mind spun. I wanted to climb faster, escape, but my body felt leaden. The thing made a sound, then a wet, gurgling inhale, and I realized it wasn't just breathing. It was imitating voices. Low whispers, fragments, overlapping. My name, my partner's name. Faint cries of children. Everything we had heard in the tunnels. Everything we had seen. It was all here, coalescing into that thing, climbing up toward us. I gripped the ladder tighter. My gloves were slick with sweat. The metal felt alive, crawling under my palms, and I knew I had to keep moving, step by step, rung by rung. But the shadow kept pace, unervingly, sliding along the iron, its limbs twisting, molding to the ladder as if it belonged to it. "Watch out!" My partner shouted from below. Something small, indistinct, darted past the lower rungs and vanished into the darkness behind us. I swung my flashlight down. Nothing, just the echo of our hearts, pounding. I could feel the thing's presence growing, oppressive, all around. The breathing, layered, multiplied, now sounding right behind my head, over my shoulder, even in my chest. I couldn't see it, couldn't make sense of it, but I knew it was climbing, coming closer. I stumbled upward, hands raw, knees shaking. The rungs bent slightly under the pressure, the metal groaning, and then I heard a whisper, soft, deliberate, right in my ear. My name, my full name. I jerked my head. Nothing. Darkness above, darkness below. Only the sound, echoing, pressing. I want to call out, to speak, but my throat felt raw, tight. I tried to think, rationalize, but it was impossible. My mind scrambled with memories, fear, the weight of the tunnels pressing on me from all sides. Every instinct screamed to get out, to drop, to run. Then the shadow made contact. Fingers impossibly thin, cold and wet, grazed my calf. I nearly lost my grip. My partner yelled something, but I couldn't process it. The sound of our own breathing, the things breathing, the echoes of the tunnels, all merged into a deafening chorus. I climbed faster, faster than I should have been able to. The shadow followed, fluid, unnatural, a mass of limbs and whispered voices. I could feel its weight, not in physical mass, but in presence, pressing relentless. At the top, a metal hatch led into the old maintenance shaft. I reached it, yanking it open, hauling myself out. The cold air hit my face, sweet, clean, real. I gasped, lungs burning. I didn't stop to look down the ladder. My partner followed, pale and shaking, flashlight dropping briefly before he caught it. We stumbled outside the tunnel entrance, night air crisp against our wet, sweating faces. I collapsed against the earth, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Behind us, the tunnel was silent again, empty, nothing, but I knew it wasn't gone. Not really. Something had followed, or maybe it had never left. The sound of multiple breaths, the voices, the thing on the ladder, it had been real, and it had learned. I looked at my partner. His face was pale, eyes wide. "Did you see it?" he asked. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. We climbed into the cruiser in silence, engine roaring, tires crunching gravel. But even as we drove away, I could hear it, in my mind at least, the overlapping breathing, the voices, whispering fragments, almost taunting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the ladder, the shadow, the hands, the thin twisting limbs, the wet, layered breathing following me everywhere. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it crawling again, always behind me, waiting for the next step. And I knew with an awful certainty that tunnels weren't just underground spaces. They were alive in a way that shouldn't exist. Hungry, patient, waiting for the next person foolish enough to climb. We left the tunnels in a silence that pressed against our ears, a kind of heavy quiet I hadn't felt before. The boy, small, pale, shivering, was in the back seat of the cruiser, wrapped in a blanket my partner had grabbed from the squad room. He didn't speak, just stared out the window at the darkened trees lining the road. Every so often, he muttered that same sentence from before, soft, almost a chant. "They're watching me." I tried to ignore it, focus on the road, on keeping my hand steady on the wheel. My partner rode shotgun, shifting uneasily, flashlight resting across his lap. Both of us had seen enough down there to know that the world above ground didn't make sense anymore. The tunnels were alive. That thing on the ladder, the breathing, the voices. And now, the boy small and silent, as if he carried it with him. We made it halfway back to the station before I noticed something off. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The boy's blanket, where he had been sitting, was empty. I slammed the brakes. Tires screeched against asphalt, heart pounding. I whipped the car into a slow spin and swung open the door. My partner's eyes were wide, frozen. He was right here. I scanned the car, the road, the dark trees flanking us. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. Just the empty back seat and the faint whisper of wind through the broken branches. I ran my hands over my face, cold sweat clinging to my skin. My mind raced. The tunnels, the way they twisted, the thing on the ladder, all the warnings we had ignored. And now the boy, gone, just vanished, as if he had been nothing more than a shadow we had chased into the dark. We called it in immediately. "Dispatch! The boy, he's gone," I stammered. Static crackled. Then calm voices on the line. "Copy. Hold your position. Backup is en route." But backup didn't help. Not here. Not for something like this. I retraced the roads, scouring the shoulders, the fields, the riverbanks. I shouted the boy's name into the wind. My partner followed, flashlight slicing the darkness. We tore through every inch within sight. Nothing. Eventually, we returned to the station, exhausted, drenched in sweat, mind spinning. The chief met us at the door, pale, tense, hands gripping the doorway as if bracing against something invisible. "Report," he said. I told him everything. The tunnels, the shadows, the breathing, the thing on the ladder, the boy's disappearance. My voice shook, faltering. Every word felt too small, too inadequate, like trying to describe a storm with a pencil. He listened, eyes narrowing. Then he spoke, voice low, measured. "No one mentions the tunnels again. Not in reports. Not in conversation. Not to anyone." I blinked. "Sir, the boy, he's gone. We can't." "No. Case closed," he said, cutting me off. "File it as a runaway." "That's it. You hear me?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him about the breathing, the thing, the names carved in stone, the toys, the shadows. But the words stuck in my throat. Even saying them aloud felt like inviting them into the world, giving them power. I nodded, swallowing the fear, the disbelief. "Yes, sir," I whispered. The rest of the department was briefed in hushed tones. Never mentioned the tunnels. Ever. It was more than an order. It was a warning. I could see it in their eyes. Every face reflected the same mixture of fear and denial. Everyone knew. Everyone had felt it. But we would not speak. I left the station that night, driving home under a sky empty of stars, the moon a pale smudge behind clouds. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following, just out of sight, breathing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Every shadow along the road seemed to move just slightly when I looked away. At home, I sat in silence. The house felt too small, too bright, and the normal sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the walls settling, were unbearable. I kept expecting the whisper, the giggle, the uneven breathing from the tunnels. Sleep wouldn't come. I thought about the boy, his eyes, black, wide, too old for his face, the way he had moved in the tunnels, precise, deliberate, and the things we had seen, the tunnels themselves, the way they seemed alive, twisting, swallowing sound and light. He hadn't just vanished. Not really. He had returned to where he belonged, or worse, been taken. I tried to remember the details, try and pin them down to reality, the carved names, the toys, the spiral of footprints. Every memory twisted in my mind, like looking through water. I couldn't tell what was real and what my imagination had filled in, and the part of me that had touched the ladder, felt the thing's fingers on my leg. That part of me refused to believe I had escaped unscathed. The next day at the station, nothing was mentioned. Not the tunnels, not the boy, not the voices. We filed our paperwork carefully. Missing child, runaway. Blank lines for everything else. Every time I looked at the map I had kept hidden in my locker, I felt my hands tighten on it reflexively. It was wrong to keep it. Dangerous. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I kept replaying the night in my mind. The tunnels. The shadows. The boy vanishing in the back seat. And that sound, the breathing. A dozen people, or something pretending to be people, compressed into the dark. I could still hear it in my dreams. Low, wet-layered, patient. Waiting. Weeks passed. The town carried on. Nothing unusual reported. People joked about the boy's disappearance as if it were normal. As if we hadn't all felt the weight of those tunnels pressing from beneath the streets. But I couldn't forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ladder. I felt the hands. I heard the breathing. I stopped talking about it entirely, even to my partner. We nodded at each other across the station, understood in silence, not because we didn't want to share, but because sharing made it real. Speaking the name of the tunnels, the thing, the boy, it was a risk, a very real risk. I drive past the forested outskirts where the collapsed building sits. Every so often, I think I see a shadow move in the corner of my eye, just at the edge of the trees. And I know it's not just imagination. It's watching, waiting, patient. The tunnels are still there, under the town, winding, twisting, swallowing sound and light. They are alive, and I know that one day someone else will climb down and it will be waiting. I keep the nightmares at bay, but they creep in slowly, a whisper in the corner of my mind. Sometimes I wake up and think I hear the breathing, layered and uneven, right next to my bed. The boy's sentence echoes faintly. They're watching me. Only now, I know he isn't speaking just for himself. I went back to the station once, weeks later. The map I had kept hidden in my locker was gone. No one asked. No one said anything. It was as if the tunnels had claimed it too. Maybe the map never existed. Maybe nothing had. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know the boy was real. Too real. The official files say the case is closed. Runaway child. No foul play. No evidence. Nothing to see here. And the department will not speak of it. Not ever. But I think about the ladder, about the shadow climbing it, the thin, cold fingers reaching, about the breathing echoing in the tunnels, and I know the truth. The case is closed for everyone else. But it isn't closed for me. It never will be. Some nights, when the wind presses against the windows, I swear I can hear it. The breathing, layered, patient. I don't move. I don't speak. I just listen because I know it's waiting. Waiting for someone else to wander too far, to look too closely, to climb that ladder. And I can't warn anyone. Not officially. Not ever. The boy is gone. The tunnels remain. The thing in the darkness waits. And I am stuck here, carrying it, knowing it, watching in my mind, in every shadow, in every corner, in every pause between breaths. I wish I could say it's over, but it's not. It will never be over. I was halfway through my shift when the call came in. Complaint about loud crying from a motel room on the edge of town. My stomach sank the moment I heard the address. Room 12 at the old Pinewood Motel. Vacant for 12 years. Closed, locked, boarded up. I glanced at my partner, half expecting a joke. He raised an eyebrow, shrugging, tapping the radio. "You got this one," he said, smirking, though I could see the unease in his eyes. We both knew the stories. Stories about the place. The old owners, the fire in the east wing, the guests who vanished, the things people whispered about late at night, the drive that was quiet, the cruiser humming under me. Streetlights flickered as we passed abandoned storefronts. I kept thinking about the crying. High-pitched, raw, wrenching. Human, but not human. The dispatcher's voice on the radio had been calm, professional. But I could hear it, even in my mind, faint, trailing after every word. It's just a noise complaint. Just a noise complaint. I pulled up in front of the motel. The place looked the same as I remember from childhood trips with my parents. Faded paint, cracked signage, broken neon letters, and a faint smell of mildew and rot lingering in the night air. Room 12's window was boarded, but faint shadows flickered behind the boards. My stomach twisted. I grabbed the keys we had for Old Patrol access, feeling their weight like it mattered. The hallway inside smelled like stale smoke, mold, and something I couldn't name. The tiles were cracked, the carpet threadbare. Every step echoed, swallowed by the darkness. I shone my flashlight down the hall, bouncing the beam across peeling wallpaper and broken doors. Room 12 was at the end. The door was locked, but not bolted. Someone had forced it open recently. The hinges groaned as I pushed, and the crying stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that was louder than any noise. I froze, hand on the doorframe, heart hammering. Nothing, just a room frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, a sagging bed, wallpaper curling from the walls. I stepped inside cautiously, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Then I saw it, wet footprints. Small, childlike, leading across the floor, up to the corner. The floorboards creaked under my boots, echoing. I whispered, "Who's here?" My voice sounded ridiculous. Even to me, the shadows didn't answer. I followed the footprints toward the corner. The crying started again, faint, distant. But now I noticed something strange. The sound wasn't coming from the corner. It was coming from the ceiling, high above from where the boards had been ripped away, exposing a loft space no one used. I squinted, flashlight rising slowly. The crying was quieter now, closer, almost intimate, like it was right behind me even though nothing was there. The air grew thick, sticky, and I could taste metal on my tongue. My pulse jumped, hands sweating against my belt. Something moved. A shadow flickered across the loft opening. I froze, stomach twisting. The crying didn't stop. It grew sharper, more urgent, layered, almost like multiple voices crying in unison. I climbed cautiously onto the bed to reach the loft ladder. Each rung felt wobbly, each step heavier than the last. The crying followed me, pressing against my ears, echoing, imitating, shifting, warping. My mind tried to make sense. It was just a prank, just an animal, something trapped. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Halfway up, the loft seemed to stretch. The boards beneath me groaned, but the space above wasn't where I expected it to be. Shadows twisted unnaturally, as if the ceiling itself had grown taller, while I wasn't looking. The crying turned into whispers, soft, overlapping, unintelligible but urgent, pleading. I reached the loft. Dust and debris choked the air. My flashlight scanned the space, but there was nothing. No one. Only old boxes, broken furniture, cobwebs. And yet, I could feel the presence. Watching, waiting. The air was alive, humming with some unseen energy. Then I saw the footprints again. Not on the floor this time, but along the wall. Tiny, smeared, clawing at the paint. Following the same path the crying seemed to take. I swallowed hard. The whispers grew louder, forming patterns I couldn't understand. My hand shook on the flashlight, light bouncing across the ceiling, catching something. A small figure, hunched, shadowed, just for a fraction of a second, vanishing before my brain could process it. I stumbled back, heart racing. The crying erupted then, louder than before, sharp and jagged, like fingernails on glass. I stumbled toward the door, tripping over the sagging carpet, flashlight clattering to the floor. The light spun across the room, catching the loft one last time. I thought I saw small hands reaching down, pressing against the boards as if trying to push something out. I scrambled out of the room, my partner's voice echoing from the hallway. "What the hell?" He saw the look on my face and didn't ask more. I couldn't explain it. There were no words, only the room, only the lingering smell of decay and fear pressing into my lungs. We secured the door, boarding it up tighter than before. My partner avoided looking at it, like acknowledging it would summon something else. I couldn't take my eyes off it. My mind kept returning to the small figure, the hands, the cry. It shouldn't have been there. It couldn't have been there. And yet, I knew it had been. Back at the cruiser, the radio squawked static, brief, meaningless. But my skin prickled. The night outside was calm. Stars hidden by clouds. Streetlights flickering. The motel sat behind us like a wound, dark and quiet. Too quiet. I kept thinking about the complaints. Reports of noises, of shadows, over the years. How no one had lived there in over a decade. How the owners had abandoned it suddenly. The pattern of disappearances. The stories people whispered on the edges of town. It all came back, screaming in my mind. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the loft, the small hands reaching down, the shadow that shouldn't exist. I heard the crying layered over itself, echoing, pressing against my brain. It wasn't just sound. It was presence, a consciousness, watching, waiting. I went back the next day, trying to convince myself it was a trick, a prank, or a dream. But the room was silent, empty, boarded up just as we left it. And yet, the air still felt thick. The cold, wet smell lingered. The dust seemed disturbed, as if someone or something had moved in the night. I didn't mention it in the report. I couldn't. Not fully. How do you write about a crying child in an empty room that hasn't been occupied in 12 years? How do you describe the shadows that twist against the ceiling, the hands that press through paint and dust, the presence that presses at your chest, waiting? So I left it vague. Noise, complaint. Check the room. Nothing found. End of call. But I knew the truth, and I carried it with me. Even now, when I drive past the old Pinewood Motel, I feel it. The space above room 12 pressing down, silent and patient, waiting for someone to hear it again, waiting for someone foolish enough to climb the loft ladder, thinking they can reach the source. And I know it's still there, that small, hunched figure, the hands pressing against the boards, the crying layered over itself, Endless, desperate. And I know that if I go back, I will see it again. And maybe this time it won't let me leave. The complaint no one wanted wasn't about noise. It was about something that should have stayed buried. Something that had learned to wait, to call, to lure. And I don't think it will ever stop. I learned that night that silence can be louder than screams. That absence can be felt in bones and lungs. That some places, no matter how long abandoned, never truly sleep. And I will never forget the sound of that crying, echoing in a room that shouldn't exist, in a motel that hadn't been occupied for 12 years. Because I know it's still listening. The motel sat there, quiet and sagging under the weight of years. I didn't want to go back. Not really. But something about the call drew me in. The echo of crying that hadn't stopped since the night before. Room 12. Boarded windows. Dust choking the air. I parked the cruiser at the edge of the lot. The headlights cutting weakly across cracked pavement. My partner stayed behind, hesitant. Flashlight resting on his lap. I didn't need company for this. I needed to see it for myself. Step inside and confirm what I already knew. The hallway smelled the same. Mildew, wet wood, and something older, deeper, like burnt sugar. My boots crunched over debris, echoing through the empty corridor. I reached room 12. The door was still secure, the boards in place, but I could feel it, the presence inside, waiting, pressing against the wood like a hand from the other side. I forced the door open. Light spilled inside the room, cutting through the darkness, and it was empty. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by the breeze slipping into the cracked boards. No furniture, nothing but the floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and the smell, sweet, metallic, unsettling. That's when I saw it. A tall mirror, impossibly clean, standing against the far wall. No frame damage, no dust, no streaks, except fingerprints. On the inside, smudged, tiny prints that hadn't been there yesterday. They weren't adult hands. Small, delicate, pressed into glass like someone had been trapped behind it, pressing against it from the other side. I stepped closer. My reflection stared back, pale, sweating, wide-eyed. But I noticed something else. Movement, subtle, impossible. A shadow curling along the edge of the glass, like it was shifting behind the reflection, independent from me. My stomach clenched. The fingerprints moved. I swear they shifted slightly, as if pressed by hands that weren't there anymore. My pulse jumped. I swallowed, throat tight. Hello. My voice cracked. The echo of my own words sounded wrong. Stretched, warped, like the room itself had swallowed and spat it back at me. Nothing answered. I circled the mirror slowly, flashlight bouncing across its surface. The room was bare, nothing to hide behind. No furniture, no debris, just empty walls and a mirror facing the door as if it had been waiting for someone to enter, waiting for me. I reached out, hand trembling. The glass was cold, unnaturally so, like touching water. The fingerprints pressed into my mind, every tiny ridge, every swirl of pressure. I wanted to wipe them away. I wanted to prove they weren't real. But the moment I touched the glass, the room shifted. The reflection changed. Not me, not my partner outside the door. Something else. A small figure, hunched, pressed against the inside of the mirror, staring out at me. No eyes, just shadowed sockets, too deep, too dark. It moved with a subtle, jerky rhythm, almost like a puppet, but with intent. Watching, waiting. I stumbled back. My flashlight caught only fragments of it. Then nothing. The reflection returned to me, pale, sweating, blinking in disbelief. I wanted to leave, run, slam the door shut, but my feet wouldn't move. My eyes were locked on the mirror. The crying started again, low at first, then growing, layered, distorted, coming from the reflection itself. It wasn't the room. It was the mirror. The glass absorbed the sound and twisted it, multiplying it. Pressing against my chest like hands made a sound. I pressed closer, staring, trying to understand. And then I saw it, a hand, small, pale, stretching along the inside of the mirror. Fingernails too long, claws maybe, dragging across the glass. Each mark a tiny scrape, a warning. My reflection mimicked it at first, then lagged, moving independently, smiling when I wasn't. I couldn't breathe. My fingers shook on the flashlight, light bouncing across the room. The mirror seemed to pulse, the surface rippling like water, distorting the room behind it. The shadows stretched, curling, almost liquid. I knew it wasn't just a reflection. It was a window into something else, something patient, something alive. I stumbled back toward the door, footsteps echoing behind me. Not mine, not my partner's. Something soft, deliberate, pressing against the floorboards, invisible yet present. I turned, flashlight slicing across empty space, and froze. The mirror had moved, not physically, but the reflection had shifted. The door behind me reflected, as if I were looking from inside the mirror itself. I gagged back a scream, reaching for the door handle. My reflection didn't move with me. It smiled, its head tilted slowly, impossibly, like a marionette, and the whispers started. Low, overlapping, voices I couldn't place. Children, adults, something older, ancient. Come, it said, layered over itself. Come. The fingerprints smudged again. I could see them stretch upward, as if someone or something was climbing toward the top of the glass, pressing closer. The air grew colder. My breath fogged the room, curling around me, small clouds in the stale darkness. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. My partner ran toward me, flashlight swinging. "What happened?" he shouted, but I couldn't answer. Words failed. All I could do was stare at the boarded-up door, the mirror, the impossible glass that had tried to reach into my world. We sealed the room again, nailed the boards tighter. My hands left wet marks on the wood, cold and clammy. My mind refused to process the reflection, the figure, the hands, the whispers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror facing the door, the small figure pressing against the glass, waiting. Days later, I went back, alone, unable to resist. The mirror was gone, not tipped over, not broken, gone. The room was bare, empty, silent. No fingerprints, no glass, no reflection. But I could feel it, the presence, leaning against the boards, waiting for me to open them. I realized then that the mirror hadn't been furniture. It hadn't been glass. It had been a doorway, a portal pressed against our world, watching, reaching, patient. And I had stared straight into it, tried to touch it, tried to understand it. I avoided the room after that. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, fatigue, adrenaline. But my dreams told a different story. In my sleep, the mirror returned, facing the door, tall, impossible. Fingers pressed against the inside, shadows curling around it, the voices layered, pleading, calling. I stopped telling anyone about the motel. My partner avoided the subject too. We filed our reports quietly. Room checked, nothing found. Noise complaint unfounded. End of call. But we knew the truth. The mirror wasn't furniture. The room wasn't empty. And the motel, abandoned, condemned, forgotten by everyone, was alive in its own way, waiting, listening, pressing against the door with invisible hands. Some nights, I swear I can see the fingerprints in my mind, small, delicate, impossible, pressing against my own reflection, reminding me, warning me, the mirror faces the door, always facing the door, always waiting. And I know when no one is watching, when the world is silent, that if I step too close, it will reach for me again. Patient, persistent, hungry. I haven't gone back. I don't think I will. But the mirror is still there, inside that room, facing the door, pressing against the world with those tiny hands. And sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear it whisper my name. The motel sat there, quiet and sagging under the weight of years. I didn't want to go back. Not really. But something about the call drew me in. The echo of crying that hadn't stopped since the night before. Room 12. Boarded windows. Dust choking the air. I parked the cruiser at the edge of the lot, the headlights cutting weakly across cracked pavement. My partner stayed behind, hesitant, flashlight resting on his lap. I didn't need company for this. I needed to see it for myself. Step inside and confirm what I already knew. The hallway smelled the same. Mildew, wet wood, and something older, deeper, like burnt sugar. My boots crunched over debris, echoing through the empty corridor. I reached room 12. The door was still secure, the boards in place, but I could feel it, the presence inside, waiting, pressing against the wood like a hand from the other side. I forced the door open. Light spilled inside the room, cutting through the darkness, and it was empty. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by the breeze slipping into the cracked boards. No furniture, nothing but the floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and the smell, sweet, metallic, unsettling. That's when I saw it. A tall mirror, impossibly clean, standing against the far wall. No frame damage, no dust, no streaks, except fingerprints on the inside, smudged. Tiny prints that hadn't been there yesterday. They weren't adult hands. Small, delicate, pressed into the glass like someone had been trapped behind it, pressing against it from the other side. I stepped closer. My reflection stared back, pale, sweating, wide-eyed. But I noticed something else. Movement, subtle, impossible. A shadow curling along the edge of the glass, like it was shifting behind the reflection, independent from me. My stomach clenched. The fingerprints moved. I swear they shifted slightly, as if pressed by hands that weren't there anymore. My pulse jumped. I swallowed, throat tight. Hello. My voice cracked. The echo of my own words sounded wrong. Stretched, warped, like the room itself had swallowed and spat it back at me. Nothing answered. I circled the mirror slowly, flashlight bouncing across its surface. The room was bare, nothing to hide behind. No furniture, no debris, just empty walls and the mirror, facing the door as if it had been waiting for someone to enter, waiting for me. I reached out, hand trembling. The glass was cold, unnaturally so, like touching water. The fingerprints pressed into my mind, every tiny ridge, every swirl of pressure. I wanted to wipe them away. I wanted to prove they weren't real. But the moment I touched the glass, the room shifted. The reflection changed. Not me, not my partner outside the door. Something else. A small figure, hunched, pressed against the inside of the mirror, staring out at me. No eyes, just shadowed sockets, too deep, too dark. It moved with a subtle, jerky rhythm, almost like a puppet, but with intent. Watching, waiting. I stumbled back. My flashlight caught only fragments of it. Then nothing. The reflection returned to me, pale, sweating, blinking in disbelief. I wanted to leave, run, slam the door shut, but my feet wouldn't move. My eyes were locked on the mirror. The crying started again, low at first, then growing, layered, distorted, coming from the reflection itself. It wasn't the room. It was the mirror. The glass absorbed the sound and twisted it, multiplying it, pressing it against my chest like hands made of sound. I pressed closer, staring, tried to understand. And then I saw it, a hand, small, pale, stretching along the inside of the mirror. Fingernails too long, claws maybe, dragging across the glass. Each mark a tiny scrape, a warning. My reflection mimicked it at first, then lagged, moving independently, smiling when I wasn't. I couldn't breathe. My fingers shook on the flashlight, light bouncing across the room. The mirror seemed to pulse, the surface rippling like water, distorting the room behind it. The shadows stretched, curling, almost liquid. I knew it wasn't just a reflection. It was a window into something else, something patient, something alive. I stumbled back toward the door, footsteps echoing behind me. Not mine, not my partner's. Something soft, deliberate, pressing against the floorboards, invisible yet present. I turned, flashlight slicing across empty space, and froze. The mirror had moved, not physically, but the reflection had shifted. The door behind me reflected, as if I were looking from inside the mirror itself. I gagged back a scream, reaching for the door handle. My reflection didn't move with me. It smiled, its head tilted slowly, impossibly, like a marionette, and the whisper started. Low, overlapping voices I couldn't place. Children, adults, something older, ancient. Come, it said, layered over itself. Come. The fingerprints smudged again. I could see them stretch upward, as if someone or something was climbing toward the top of the glass, pressing closer. The air grew colder. My breath fogged the room. Curling around me, small clouds and stale darkness. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. My partner ran toward me, flashlight swinging. "What happened?" he shouted, but I couldn't answer. Words failed. All I could do was stare at the boarded-up door, the mirror, the impossible glass that had tried to reach into my world. We sealed the room again, nailed the boards tighter. My hands left wet marks on the wood, cold and clammy. My mind refused to process the reflection, the figure, the hands, the whispers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror facing the door, the small figure pressing against the glass, waiting. Days later, I went back, alone, unable to resist. The mirror was gone, not tipped over, not broken, gone. The room was bare, empty, silent. No fingerprints, no glass, no reflection. But I could feel it, the presence, leaning against the boards, waiting for me to open them. I realized then that the mirror hadn't been furniture. It hadn't been glass. It had been a doorway, a portal pressed against our world, watching, reaching, patient. And I had stared straight into it, tried to touch it, tried to understand it. I avoided the room after that. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, fatigue, adrenaline. But my dreams told a different story. In my sleep, the mirror returned, facing the door, tall, impossible. Fingers pressed against the inside, shadows curling around it, the voices layered, pleading, calling. I stopped telling anyone about the motel. My partner avoided the subject too. We filed our reports quietly. Room checked, nothing found. Noise complaint unfounded. End of call. But we knew the truth. The mirror wasn't furniture. The room wasn't empty. And the motel, abandoned, condemned, forgotten by everyone, was alive in its own way, waiting, listening, pressing against the door with invisible hands. Some nights, I swear I can see the fingerprints in my mind, small, delicate, impossible, pressing against my own reflection, reminding me, warning me, the mirror faces the door, always facing the door, always waiting. And I know, when no one is watching, when the world is silent, that if I step too close, it will reach me again, patient, persistent, hungry. I haven't gone back. I don't think I will. But the mirror is still there, inside that room, facing the door, pressing against the world with those tiny hands. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear it whisper my name. The motel sat there, quiet and sagging under the weight of years. I didn't want to go back. Not really. But something about the call drew me in. The echo of crying that hadn't stopped since the night before. Room 12. Boarded windows. Dust choking the air. I parked the cruiser at the edge of the lot, the headlights cutting weakly across cracked pavement. My partner stayed behind, hesitant, flashlight resting on his lap. I didn't need company for this. I needed to see it for myself. Step inside and confirm what I already knew. The hallway smelled the same, mildew, wet wood, and something older, deeper, like burnt sugar. My boots crunched over debris, echoing through the empty corridor. I reached room 12. The door was still secure, the boards in place, but I could feel it, the presence inside, waiting, pressing against the wood like a hand from the other side. I forced the door open. Light spilled inside the room, cutting through the darkness, and it was empty. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by the breeze, slipping into the cracked boards. No furniture, nothing but the floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and the smell, sweet, metallic, unsettling. That's when I saw it. A tall mirror, impossibly clean, standing against the far wall. No frame damage, no dust, no streaks, except fingerprints. On the inside, smudged, tiny prints that hadn't been there yesterday. They weren't adult hands. Small, delicate, pressed into glass like someone had been trapped behind it, pressing against it from the other side. I stepped closer. My reflection stared back, pale, sweating, wide-eyed. But I noticed something else. Movement, subtle, impossible. A shadow curling along the edge of the glass, like it was shifting behind the reflection, independent from me. My stomach clenched. The fingerprints moved. I swear they shifted slightly. as if pressed by hands that weren't there anymore. My pulse jumped. I swallowed, throat tight. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The echo of my own words sounded wrong. Stretched, warped, like the room itself had swallowed and spat it back at me. Nothing answered. I circled the mirror slowly, flashlight bouncing across its surface. The room was bare, nothing to hide behind. No furniture, no debris, just empty walls and the mirror, facing the door as if it had been waiting for someone to enter. Waiting for me. I reached out, hand trembling. The glass was cold, unnaturally so, like touching water. The fingerprints pressed into my mind, every tiny ridge, every swirl of pressure. I wanted to wipe them away. I wanted to prove they weren't real. But the moment I touched the glass, the room shifted. The reflection changed. Not me, not my partner outside the door. Something else. A small figure, hunched, pressed against the inside of the mirror, staring out at me. No eyes, just shadowed sockets, too deep, too dark. It moved with a subtle, jerky rhythm, almost like a puppet, but with intent. Watching, waiting. I stumbled back. My flashlight caught only fragments of it. Then nothing. The reflection returned to me, pale, sweating, blinking in disbelief. I wanted to leave, run, slam the door shut, but my feet wouldn't move. My eyes were locked on the mirror. The crying started again. Low at first, then growing, layered, distorted, coming from the reflection itself. It wasn't the room. It was the mirror. The glass absorbed the sound and twisted it, multiplying it, pressing it against my chest like hands made a sound. I pressed closer, staring, trying to understand. And then I saw it, a hand, small, pale, stretching along the inside of the mirror. Fingernails too long, claws maybe, dragging across the glass. Each mark a tiny scrape, a warning. My reflection mimicked it at first, then lagged, moving independently, smiling when I wasn't. I couldn't breathe. My fingers shook on the flashlight, light bouncing across the room. The mirror seemed to pulse, the surface rippling like water, distorting the room behind it. The shadows stretched, curling, almost liquid. I knew it wasn't just a reflection. It was a window into something else, something patient, something alive. I stumbled back toward the door, footsteps echoing behind me. Not mine, not my partner's. Something soft, deliberate, pressing against the floorboards, invisible yet present. I turned, flashlight slicing across empty space, and froze. The mirror had moved, not physically, but the reflection had shifted. The door behind me reflected, as if I were looking from inside the mirror itself. I gagged back a scream, reaching for the door handle. My reflection didn't move with me. It smiled, its head tilted slowly, impossibly, like a marionette, and the whisper started. Low, overlapping, voices I couldn't place. Children, adults, something older, ancient. Come, it said, layer over itself. Come. The fingerprints smudged again. I could see them stretch upward, as if someone or something was climbing toward the top of the glass. Pressing closer, the air grew colder. My breath fogged the room, curling around me, small clouds in the stale darkness. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. My partner ran toward me, flashlight swinging. "What happened?" he shouted, but I couldn't answer. Words failed. All I could do was stare at the boarded-up door, the mirror, the impossible glass that had tried to reach into my world. We sealed the room again, nailed the boards tighter. My hands left wet marks on the wood, cold and clammy. My mind refused the process of reflection. The figure, the hands, the whispers. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror facing the door, the small figure pressing against the glass, waiting. Days later, I went back, alone, unable to resist. The mirror was gone, not tipped over, not broken, gone. The room was bare, empty, silent. No fingerprints, no glass, no reflection. But I could feel it, the presence, leaning against the boards, waiting for me to open them. I realized then that the mirror hadn't been furniture. It hadn't been glass. It had been a doorway, a portal pressed against our world, watching, reaching, patient. And I had stared straight into it, try to touch it, try to understand it. I avoided the room after that. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, fatigue, adrenaline. But my dreams told a different story. In my sleep, the mirror returned, facing the door, tall, impossible. Fingers pressed against the inside, shadows curling around it, the voices layered, pleading, calling. I stopped telling anyone about the motel. My partner avoided the subject too. We filed our reports quietly. Room checked, nothing found. Noise complaint unfounded. End of call. But we knew the truth. The mirror wasn't furniture. The room wasn't empty. And the motel, abandoned, condemned, forgotten by everyone, was alive in its own way. Waiting, listening, pressing against the door with invisible hands. Some nights, I swear I can see the fingerprints in my mind. Small, delicate, impossible. Pressing against my own reflection. Reminding me, warning me, the mirror faces the door. Always facing the door. Always waiting. And I know, when no one is watching, when the world is silent, that if I step too close, it will reach for me again. Patient, persistent, hungry. I haven't gone back. I don't think I will. But the mirror is still there, inside that room, facing the door, pressing against the world with those tiny hands. And sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear it whisper my name. The call came just as dusk was settling over town. The mill on the outskirts, long condemned, half-rotted, boarded windows. The kind of place kids dare each other to enter and grown men avoid at night. Reports of figures moving inside. The sound of metal scraping against metal. My stomach tightened before I even pulled into the lot. I parked the cruiser under the skeletal remains of a loading dock. The wind pushed through broken panes, carrying the smell of rust, rot, and something older, almost like burnt sugar. My partner hovered by the car, flashlight ready, eyes darting to the shadows. I could feel the tension thrumming between us. Figures, he muttered, or kids playing around? I didn't answer. It didn't feel like kids. Not tonight. There was a weight to the call, an urgency in the dispatcher's voice I couldn't ignore. Something had been inside that mill, moving around, scraping metal against beams. And now, we were supposed to investigate. The mill loomed ahead. Its walls sagged under years of neglect. Broken windows gaped like teeth. I could almost hear it breathing. I swallowed, gripping my flashlight tighter, boots crunching over debris and glass as we approached. The front door was ajar, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. A faint groan echoed to the hollow interior as I pushed it further open. Darkness swallowed us, only my flashlight cutting a weak path across dust, beams, and broken machinery. Stay close, I whispered. The floorboards creaked under our boots. Every step sounded amplified, echoing in the cavernous space. Shadows twisted across rafters and machinery. But I knew better than to trust them. My gut told me something moved independently of light, of sound, of physics. Something waiting. Then I heard it, metal scraping. Slow, deliberate, echoing from the upper floor. My pulse jumped. My partner froze beside me. I strained to listen. Not a child playing, not a raccoon. Too precise, too deliberate. I signaled him forward, flashlight cutting a path toward the stairwell. The stairs groaned under our weight, complaining with each step. The scraping continued, intermittent now, as if pacing, circling, following. I wanted to call in, request backup, but there was something else in my chest, deeper than fear. A pull, a need to see it, to know what was making that sound. At the top of the stairs, the second floor opened into a long corridor. Broken railings, peeling paint, dust thick enough to choke. The scraping was closer now, somewhere in the shadows. I could feel vibrations in the floorboards, like the building itself was trembling with anticipation. I whispered, "Who's there?" The sound of my own voice startled me, echoing like it had been swallowed and spat back, warped and distant. No answer, only the scraping, just beyond the reach of the flashlight's beam. We moved down the corridor slowly, each step careful. Every broken window, a potential mouth for whatever might emerge. The air smelled stale, like old wood soaked in years of rain. The scraping stopped suddenly. Silence fell heavy and complete. My heart thumped in my ears. And then I saw it, a shadow long and thin, pressed against the wall at the far end, not fully formed, but definite. Human-like in shape, hunched, crouched. I froze. The shadow moved, almost gliding across the wall, bending in ways that didn't make sense. Step back, I whispered to my partner, though I knew he couldn't hear me over the ringing in my ears. The figure shifted. Metal scraped again, closer, deliberate. It wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from the thing itself. Claws, hands, something sliding along the old beams and pipes. The sound grated against my teeth, vibrating through my skull. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. My flashlight caught glimpses of it. Elongated limbs, angles that weren't right, skin too pale, too smooth, almost reflective in patches where the light hit. The head tilted unnaturally, observing, waiting. I could feel it studying me, every instinct screaming to run, but my legs refused. The corridor seemed to stretch as I took a step closer. Shadows pooled, blacker than they should have been, curling toward me. My breath came in shallow bursts, fogging in the cold, stale air. I want to call it hallucination, fatigue, stress, but the scraping, the deliberate movement, told me otherwise. It moved again, just a step, just enough to make me flinch. I swear I heard it breathe, slow, wet, deliberate. I thought about yelling, calling for backup, but something stopped me. The air pressed in, thick and suffocating, like the building itself was alive, holding its breath. My partner tried to move forward, and I grabbed his arm. "Wait, don't move," I whispered. The figure didn't run. It didn't hide. It just watched. And then something worse happened. The scraping started again, but now from all directions, echoing impossible. It wasn't moving around the room. It was inside my head, layered, relentless. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over a broken railing. The beam of the flashlight caught the figure again, just for a second. That second burned into my mind. No eyes, just dark sockets, blacker than the shadows around it, fixed on me, limbs twisting unnaturally, dragging itself closer without walking. The air grew colder. The smell of rust and rot intensified, mixed with something iron-like, coppery. My chest tightened. Every muscle in my body screamed to leave, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. I raised my flashlight higher. It didn't flinch. The scraping came again, right beside me, not from the shadow, not from the floor, from inside the walls, inside the beams, inside the floor, everywhere. The sound pressed against my ears, a chorus of metal dragging, scraping, deliberate, patient. I stumbled back, yelling now, urging my partner to move. He hesitated, eyes wide, frozen. I grabbed his arm and pulled him down the stairs, dragging him through the corridor. The figure didn't chase. It just stayed, pressed into the shadows, watching, patient. We burst out the front door, gasping. The night air hit like a wave, cutting through the chill and smell of the mill. My partner leaned against the cruiser, shaking. I could see it in his eyes. He knew. Whatever that was, we had just met it, and it had let us go. For now, I kept looking back at the mill. The shadow wasn't there, only the sagging boards, the dark silhouette of the building against the night sky. But I could feel it, watching, patient, waiting. On the drive back, silence hung between us. The radio crackled occasionally, static in the night. Nothing alive talked back. But I could feel it in the car, pressing against the windows through the floor inside my skull. Sleep didn't come that night. I kept seeing the figure, the black sockets, the metal scraping echoing in my ears. Every shadow in my bedroom seemed too long, too still. The air pressed down, heavy with the memory of that presence. I didn't return to the mill. Not that night. Not for a long time. But I know it's there, waiting, layered into the building, into the air, into the very night. Patient, learning. I catch myself imagining the scraping sometimes, long after the call, in my apartment, in the shower, even on the street. A reminder that presence isn't bound by walls, isn't constrained by light or time. It watches, patient, persistent. And I know one day I'll hear it again. That slow, deliberate scraping, metal against wood, something alive in the shadows, waiting, patient, watching. I just hope I'm ready. The mill had been silent for a week in my mind before I returned. The memory of the scraping, the shadow of the black sockets, it gnawed at me, twisting in my dreams. My partner tried to convince me not to go back, muttering something about abandonment and imagination, but I couldn't leave it alone. The reports came in again, lights flickering in the furnace room. Heat detected despite no power, no fuel. Something was there, and I had to see it. I parked under the skeletal remains of the loading dock. The night was thick with fog, cold clinging to my skin, curling around the edges of my jacket. My boots crunched over broken glass. As I walked toward the main entrance, the mill towered, sagging in the moonlight, windows like dark eyes staring down at me. The front door had been sealed after our last visit, boards nailed tight, dust caking every edge. I pried a panel loose with a crowbar, heart hammering in my chest. My flashlight cut a beam through the darkness. The air smelled metallic, like iron and old soot, stale and heavy. The stairs to the upper floor creaked under my weight as I moved through the corridors. The scraping hadn't returned yet, but I felt it. A presence lurking in the corners, patient, deliberate. Shadows pooled around me, thick and unnatural, curling along the walls. I reached the furnace room at the back of the mill. The door was unhinged, swinging slightly as though nudged by an unseen hand. I paused, flashlight trembling in my grip. The heat hit me before I saw the flames. The furnace was burning, bright, orange flames licking the rusted metal walls, black smoke curling upward, but there was no fuel, no wood, no coal, nothing. The room had no power. Nothing should have been alive here, and yet the fire burned, steady, patient, casting its glow over the walls, the pipes, the shattered floor. I stepped inside cautiously, boots echoing against metal grates and broken machinery. Heat radiated against my skin, heavy and unnatural. I shined my light over the room. Pipes twisted along the walls, rusted beyond repair. Machinery lay in piles, corroded and motionless. Nothing could sustain a fire here, and yet it burned. I heard it then, a low hum, almost like a voice vibrating from the furnace itself. I bent closer, squinting at the fire. Shadows danced across the walls. I swear I saw figures in the flames, small, hunched, pressed into the orange glow, hands stretching toward me and then recoiling, vanishing before I could blink. Who's there? I whispered. My voice sounded wrong in the space, swallowed and stretched by the heat and the darkness. The hum intensified, layered, multiple tones vibrating against my chest. I tried to back up. My boots slipped on the wet metal floor, echoing with a hollow clang. And then I realized something worse. The reflection. The walls themselves seemed to ripple, not solid metal but liquid, mirrors reflecting things that shouldn't exist. My own reflection stared back at me, but not mine entirely. Something behind it, small, hunched, pressing closer. Its hands glimmered in the firelight, then elongated, reaching toward the edge of the glassy shadows. The heat pressing on me, suffocating, and the hum became words. Not words I could understand, but syllables shaped by intent. Pleading? Threats? I couldn't tell, but the vibration sank into my chest, bone deep, resonating with my heartbeat. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run screaming, but my feet wouldn't move. The fire danced, casting long shadows that moved independently, curling around the edges of the room. One shadow detached, gliding over the floor, thin and jerky, moving toward me without sound. I lifted my flashlight, swinging across the room. The figure disappeared. The fire roared, and I could feel it. The presence, not on the floor, not on the walls, but inside the room itself. Patient, deliberate, alive. I circled the furnace, searching for an exit, a clue, anything that could explain the impossible. Flames licked the metal, and I noticed it. Tiny footprints along the edge of the furnace. Small, narrow, human-like, but wrong. Too many toes maybe, too long. Pressed into the scorched metal, like someone had climbed out of the fire itself. I staggered back, flashlight shaking. The air grew hotter. The walls pulsed, bending, reflecting things that weren't there. The hum now layered with whispering, voices overlapping, insistent. I could feel them pressing against my skin, in my ears, in my chest. The furnace roared, though it had no fuel. The shadows and the flames twisted toward me, fingers stretching, pressing, waiting. I stumbled toward the door, flashlight bouncing wildly. Something inside the room shifted. A shape peeled off the furnace itself. Thin, small, hunched, moving with a jerky, deliberate motion. It didn't run. It didn't flee. It just followed, pressing, hands raised, dragging across the metal floor. The smell hit me then, burnt hair iron and something sweet, like sugar. My stomach churned. I tried to back up, tripping over pipes, metal debris scraping against my palms. The figure didn't come closer. It stayed just at the edge of the flames, watching, patient, its head tilted unnaturally, and I swear I felt its eyes on my chest, burning, cold, intent. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and loud. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but the voices layered in the hum now pressed against my throat, gagging me, pulling words away. I staggered to the door, yanking it open. The hallway was empty. The shadows didn't follow. The heat didn't spill out. But I knew the furnace had eyes now, and it watched. Outside, I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My partner hadn't moved. He stared at me, wide-eyed, silent. I couldn't explain. I didn't try. Words would have failed anyway. The fire, the shadows, the figure. None of it fit into the world outside the mill. It existed only inside, patient, deliberate, watching. We left the mill, doors sealed as best we could. The heat was gone, but I could still feel it pressing against me in the dark, in the silence of the night. Every streetlight flicker, every reflection in a puddle or window seemed alive with it. That night, sleep didn't come. Every dark corner of my apartment carried the smell of burnt metal, sugar, and rust. Every shadow twisted unnaturally when I wasn't looking directly. I could hear the furnace in my chest, low, layered, insistent. The voices whisper my name. I returned a week later, only briefly. The furnace room was cold now, the fire gone. No footprints, no heat, but the walls pulsed faintly, like the echoes of the fire still alive in the metal. And in the corner, I swore I saw small, pale fingers pressed against the shadows, just at the edge, watching. I didn't tell anyone, not my partner, not dispatch, not anyone. I could feel the pull, patient, deliberate, inside me. The furnace might be gone, but it had left something. Watching, learning, patient, waiting. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see the fire, feel the heat on my skin, hear the scraping, the whispers, the voices layered over one another, the shadowed figure, small, hunched, pressing against the invisible edge of the flame, its hands thin, deliberate, reaching. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it will come for me, but I know it's still alive, patient, waiting, inside the mill, inside the walls, inside me, and I know I'll never forget the heat of the furnace, the impossible fire and the hands pressing from shadows. It's still watching. I couldn't stop thinking about the mill, the furnace room, the heat, the shadows. It followed me, a low hum in my skull that didn't fade, but the reports kept coming, lights flickering, doors opening, figures glimpsed inside. And this time, something else. Someone had discovered carvings on the wall in the basement, names, 40 years old, forgotten faces in the town's history, missing persons, some of them children. I parked outside the mill before dawn. The air was thick with fog, clinging to my jacket and crawling into my hair. I tried to tell myself it was just coincidence, that the wall had been used by vandals or kids long ago. But deep down, I knew better. The pull of the mill was stronger than reason. The door had been sealed after the last visit. But like before, I pried a panel loose. My flashlight cut a path through dust and darkness. The stairs groaned under my boots. Every echo felt deliberate, as though the building itself was watching me move. I descended to the basement. The temperature dropped, damp and heavy, smelling of mold and rust. My flashlight beam flicked across broken machinery, piles of old wood and scraps of metal. And then I saw it, names carved deep into the walls. Hundreds of them, some overlapping, some etched precisely, others jagged and uneven, as if carved in a panic. I stepped closer. My breath hitched. Some of the names matched missing persons from the town's records. Children and adults vanished without trace decades ago. My pulse raced. I ran my fingers over one of the deeper carvings. The grooves were fresh, despite the dust covering everything else, which splintered just beneath my touch. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through my chest. It wasn't coming from my equipment or the building. It was inside me, inside the walls. I backed up, heart hammering, shining my flashlight along the rest of the wall. The names continued, some smudged by water damage, others pristine, as though someone or something added them recently. A cold sweat ran down my spine. I could hear movement behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just shadows stretching across the basement floor. But the air felt alive, pressing down, thickening with anticipation. I shone the flashlight toward the far corner. A figure crouched there, small, hunched, hands pressed against the wall where a name had just been carved. I swallowed, voice shaking. Who's there? No answer. The figure remained still, thin, almost skeletal, pressed into the corner like it belonged to the shadows themselves. The sound of metal scraping against stone echoed faintly, but the figure didn't move. I realized then, the carvings weren't just names. They were invitations, markers, claims. I moved closer to the wall. The names shifted in the beam of my flashlight, lines stretching, bending, letters elongating. My own name crawled into view. I jerked backward, choking on my own breath. It wasn't there before. I hadn't imagined it. Someone or something added it while I watched, waiting, patient. A whisper slithered through the room. Not my partner, not a recording. It wasn't language, not exactly. Just sibilant syllables, layered, deliberate. I pressed my hand against my chest. The heartbeat echoed in my ears, syncing with the hum in the basement. The figure shifted, its head tilted unnaturally. Small pale fingers trailing across the wall, over names I didn't recognize. But the ones I did, the children, the lost adults, seemed to shimmer faintly in the flashlight beam. I could feel their presence, hollow-eyed and patient, watching me. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape. But the basement stretched further than it should. Shadows pulled into corners, wrapping around machinery, slithering along the walls. Every step I took felt heavier, the floor vibrating beneath my boots. I tried to focus on the names. The oldest ones were jagged, crude. The more recent ones, smoother, deliberate, almost ceremonial. And then I realized they all shared something in common. The dates weren't random. The oldest vanished 40 years ago. The more recent ones over the past few weeks, months, as if something had resumed its tally. The figure shifted again, closer this time. I could hear its breathing now, multiple breaths layered together, uneven and wet. My flashlight beam caught the hands pressed against the wall. Fingernails blackened, elongated, scraping lightly over carved names. The smell hit me. Iron, rust, decay, and that faint sweetness from before. Who are you? I whispered, voice cracking. The air pressed in. The hum intensified. The figure didn't answer in words. It pressed its face closer to the wall, tilting at impossible angles. And then something impossible happened. The eyes, deep black, reflective, hollow, yet somehow aware, shifting toward me. They weren't human, but they were alive, aware, patient. I stumbled backward, tripping over broken debris. The beam of the flashlight bounced across the wall. Names seemed to twitch, letters curling and uncurling as if alive. My mind reeled. How could we do this? How could shadows shape letters? Something was in the room with me, patient, deliberate, marking its claims. The figure began to move along the wall, dragging itself across the floor. The scraping was soft but deliberate. I could see its elongated limbs, bending in ways that made my stomach churn. Every step it took felt like a countdown, slow, precise, inevitable. I could hear whispers now, layered over the scraping, syllables brushing against my eardrums in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Names twisted on the beam of the flashlight. New ones appearing, letters darkening as if burned into the wood by unseen flames. My partner's voice crackled faintly over the radio, calling my name. I tried to respond, but found the words caught in my throat. The figure didn't react. It was patient, deliberate. A shadow pressed into the wall, counting, recording, waiting. I forced myself to breathe. I had to understand. I approached the wall again. The names now illuminated fully by my flashlight, pulsed faintly, as if breathing with the basement itself. The oldest names whispered in my mind, memories of people I'd never met. Children laughing, adults arguing, faces missing from the world, now pressed into it by something alive. I reached out, hand trembling, to touch a newer carving. Instantly, a cold, wet pressure gripped my chest. The whispers intensified, voices overlapping into a roar inside my skull. I gasped, stumbling backward, and the figure moved closer, its head tilted inhumanly. Fingers scraping over names with patience, curiosity, and intent. I realized then, the names weren't just records. They were invitations, warnings, perhaps even vessels. 40 years of vanished people, now compressed into this wall, this presence. And now it had noticed me. My name was carved there, faintly, but unmistakably. Panic rose. I stumbled toward the stairs. The figure didn't follow, but pressed closer to the wall, hands tracing the names, head tilted, observing. The air pressed against my skin, thick, heavy, alive. My heartbeat echoed in the room, mingling with the scraping, the whispers, the hum. I burst through the basement door into the cold night. The mill loomed silently, windows black and empty. My partner met my eyes, pale, shaking. I didn't speak. Words would fail to explain it. The wall had eyes. The names had voices. And something had been waiting, patient, deliberate, recording its tally. I drive past the mill every day now. I avoid looking at the basement windows. But at night, when I close my eyes, I see the wall. I see the carved names, old and new, stretching endlessly, pulsing with presence. I feel the hands tracing the letters. I hear the whispers. 40 years. 40 years of vanished lives, counting, patient, deliberate. And now, my name waits among them. I can't forget. I can't leave it alone. And I know one day I'll return, because the wall is waiting, and it always will be. I couldn't stop thinking about the mill, or the furnace, or the wall with the names. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows curling across cracked floors, felt the heat pressing against my chest, heard the scraping echoing in my skull. But I returned. I couldn't stay away. Reports came in again. A figure seen inside the mill's furnace room, despite no firewood, no power, no fuel. And this time, the words chilled me before I even drove out. A man standing inside the flames without a shadow. The night was dark, the fog thick, curling around my cruiser as I parked near the edge of the property. I kept thinking about the scraping, the hands on the wall, the names carved into the wood. That presence never left. And I could feel it tonight, pulling me toward the furnace room with every step. The front door was worse than I remembered. Boards broken, hanging like crooked teeth, warped by years of neglect. I pried one loose. Flashlight cutting a path into the black maw of the mill. The smell hit me immediately. Scorched wood, rust, and that faint, sweet coppery odor that made my stomach churn. I stepped inside, boots crunching over debris. Shadows pooled, curling into corners, stretching unnaturally. My partner stayed back at the cruiser, unwilling to follow, leaving me alone. I didn't blame him. Even in the daylight, the mill seemed alive with something patient and deliberate. I moved toward the furnace room, steps echoing off broken walls. And then I saw it, flames, bright and unnatural, licking the rusted metal of the furnace. But what made me stop cold wasn't the fire. It was a figure, a man, standing inside the flames. Not behind them, not beside them. Inside. The fire didn't burn him. The heat didn't touch him. His feet were planted firmly on the metal floor, but no shadow stretched behind him. Not one. I swept my flashlight over him. He didn't move, didn't breathe visibly, yet somehow he was alive, or something like it. The air around him shimmered, twisting, bending. The heat pressed against me like a living thing, thick and suffocating. My chest tightened, my flashlight flickered, and I realized the shadows around him weren't natural. They recoiled from the fire, shrank and twisted. as if some law of physics had been rewritten in this room alone. I whispered, barely audible, Who are you?" No answer, only the low hum, vibrating inside my skull, inside the walls, inside the air itself. The fire roared, unnatural, alive. Shadows curled along the walls, but none touched him. The man stood, patient, deliberate, watching me with eyes too dark, too reflective, and uncomfortably still. I moved closer. Each step made the floor groan under my weight. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, matching the rhythm of the hum. I thought I was seeing things. But no, he was real and impossible. I raised my flashlight higher. The beam caught his hands. They were thin, pale, almost skeletal. Fingers extended unnaturally, like the limbs of something that shouldn't exist. But he didn't reach for me. He didn't move at all, yet I felt the pressure of his awareness pressing against my skin, my chest, my skull. The fire pulsed, brightening, dimming, and with each pulse I felt it. The presence. It wasn't just a man. The room itself, the furnace, the walls, the shadows, all of it pressed toward me with patient insistence. And then I realized something worse. The reflection, the walls shimmered as I looked. My own reflection stretched across the floor, warped and flickering. But in the reflection, the man's shadow existed, black, dense, creeping along the walls and floor, reaching toward me. My stomach dropped. The figure in the room had no shadow, but in the world reflected back. He had one, and it moved, patient, intent. I stumbled back, flashlight swinging wildly. The hum intensified, layering voices into my chest, overlapping, impossible. The air pressed in, every breath sharp, metallic. I wanted to turn and flee, but my legs refused. Every instinct screamed to run, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. Then he moved, just slightly, a tilt of the head, a shift of weight. The flames licked around him, yet he didn't burn. Heat radiated into the room, unnatural, alive, and the shadows on the walls recoiled. I realized then he was not part of this world, not entirely, not human. I tried to speak. My voice cracked. What are you?" The room pulsed with energy. The shadows writhed, stretching across the walls in unnatural patterns. The reflection on the floor showed the figure's shadow, inching closer, curling, twisting, reaching for me. I stumbled backward, heart racing, and caught a glimpse of the floor near the furnace. Small shapes, pale and skeletal, pressed against the edges of flames. Fingers, dozens of them, crawling along the metal like insects. The man didn't react. He didn't flinch, didn't shift. He just stood patient, deliberate, watching. And I understood he was the master of this room. The fire, the shadows, the reflections, they all obeyed him. Everything here, including the fear in my chest, was his domain. I could feel it pressing into my mind, probing, patient, deliberate. Memories of the mill, the furnace, the names on the wall, the scraping from before. They weren't just memories. They were claims, records, and I was now part of it. I turned to leave. My flashlight caught a name on the wall, one I hadn't noticed before, freshly carved. My own name. The letters were precise, deliberate, blackened by some unseen heat. The hum grew, voices overlapping in my skull. I choked back a scream, stumbled, and realized the man's attention was on me now. He raised a hand. Slowly, deliberately, I felt the pressure, the pull, as if the air itself was bending toward him. Shadows around the walls stretched, reaching, curling. The reflection on the floor pulsed, and in it, the shadow lunged toward me. I stumbled back, out of the room, tripping over debris. The fire roared, yet the man didn't move. He stayed, planted in the flames, watching, patient, deliberate, eternal. Outside, I gasped for air, heart hammering. My partner stared at me from the cruiser, frozen. Words failed me. The fire, the figure, the shadows, the reflection, they defied explanation. I just knew it was alive. Not alive in a human sense. Alive in a way older, deeper, patient, and deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. The image of him standing in the flames, the black eyes, the shadow and the reflection, haunted every corner of my mind. I could feel it even now, patient, waiting, deliberate. Every shadow, every flicker of light. Every reflection reminds me of him. I know I will return. I don't know when or why or what I hope to find, but the man without a shadow waits. Inside the mill, inside the furnace, inside every reflection. Patient, deliberate, watching. And I know one day he will call my name. It was just past midnight when the call came through. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that presses against your chest and makes every shadow feel alive. I had just finished my shift and was heading back to the station when the dispatcher's voice crackled again. Something about a woman near the alley behind the shopping center. The reports were vague. A pale figure, asking for help, then disappearing when anyone approached. I parked my cruiser near the dumpsters. The area smelled of rotting garbage, sour and cloying, mixing with the damp coal that hung over the asphalt. Streetlights flickered, struggling to pierce the darkness. I stepped out, boots crunching over broken glass and scattered trash. My flashlight cut a narrow path, illuminating the edges of dumpsters and the walls of the nearby buildings. She was there, pale as chalk, thin, standing too still, too quiet. Her eyes were wide, almost unblinking, reflecting the dim light. She held her hands out as if pleading, voice soft and raspy, barely audible over the hum of the streetlights. "Please, help me." Her words carried a weight, a kind of desperation I couldn't ignore. My hand instinctively went to my radio. "Officer here. What's going on?" But the dispatcher had nothing, just static and the echo of my own voice bouncing back. I lifted my body cam and clicked it on. The red recording light blinked. As soon as I turned toward her, she was gone, just like that. No step sounds, no movement, just empty space where she had been standing. My pulse spiked. "Ma'am!" I called out, voice trembling slightly. The only response was a flutter of trash caught in the wind, rattling against the bins. I stepped closer, flashlight sweeping every corner, every shadow. Nothing. The alley stretched longer than I remembered, shadows pooling thick and unnatural, curling along the brick walls. The cold pressed against me, sinking into my bones. I could still feel her presence, a subtle pressure, like the air itself. Remember her, clinging, patient. I muttered to myself, trying to shake the fear. I'm not imagining this. She was right there. The body cam blinked, recording. I checked it quickly. Nothing, no figure, no movement, no trace that anyone had been there. Only the dim, flickering alley, my own reflection in the camera lens staring back at me, pale and tense. I retraced my steps, flashlight swinging over the concrete and scattered garbage. And then I heard it, a soft shuffle behind the bins, barely audible, like someone dragging their feet. My breath hitched. I moved cautiously, hand on my holster, flashlight trembling. "Ma'am, are you there?" Silence. Then the whisper. "Help." It wasn't loud, not fully formed words. Just the sound of her voice, low, raspy, echoing from inside the bins themselves. I froze, heart pounding. The body cam in my hand recorded nothing, just a dim light reflecting off metal and plastic. The way shadows pulled unnaturally in the corners. I leaned closer, flashlight illuminating the space beneath the dumpsters. Empty, no one, but the smell changed. Faint, almost sweet metallic. Coppery, like blood. My stomach churned. Something brushed my arm. I jumped back, flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing there. My pulse was racing, ears ringing, chest tight. The cold pressed harder, and I felt it. Not her, not a person, but something patient, deliberate, watching from the edges of my vision. I whispered under my breath, trying to rationalize. It's just an abandoned alley. Someone's playing a prank. Nothing more. But the unease gnawed at me, sharp, deliberate, a quiet voice in my chest. The whisper came again, closer this time. Clearer. "Help me." I spun, flashlight cutting across the bins. My eyes scanned every shadow. Nothing. The alley seemed longer now, darker, the light of the street lamps flickering as if disturbed. I could feel it, something pressing just beyond the reach of the light. Patient, deliberate, waiting. I stepped backward, tripping over a cracked piece of concrete. The body cam in my hand wobbled, red recording light still blinking. I glanced down at it. Still nothing. No figure. No shadow. No trace of anyone. Just the empty alley, stretching endlessly, swallowing sound. Then she appeared again. Pale, thin, almost translucent, standing at the edge of the dumpster, eyes wide, hands reaching out. The red light from my body cam reflected in her eyes. I clicked it toward her. She vanished. No step, no movement, just empty space where she had been. The whisper followed, now behind me. Help! I spun, flashlight sweeping the alley. Shadows pooled unnaturally. Corners curling, shapes bending just slightly, as if the world itself warped around her presence. My heart hammered in my chest. I could feel her watching, patient, deliberate, pressing into the air, into me. I stumbled backward, body cam shaking. The recording light blinked red. But the screen showed only the alley. My reflection stared back at me, tense, pale, disbelieving. The whisper repeated, now layered, overlapping, multiple tones pressing into my skull. I tried to speak. Who, what do you want? No response. Just a shuffle of air, the scrape of something against the dumpster. I froze. The smell again, metallic, sweet, wrong. My stomach churned. The alley seemed longer, stretching, twisting, swallowing the light of my flashlight. I backed up, tripping over loose trash, landing hard on my knees. The whisper came again, pressing against me, inside me. Help! And then she was there again, standing closer, just beyond the edge of the light. Pale, thin, hands reaching. No shadow. I noticed it this time. Her feet, the light around her. No shadow. The physics of the world seemed to reject her presence. I gasped, scrambling to my feet, body cam clutched tightly. I shined the flashlight directly on her. She vanished again. My pulse was racing, chest tight, mind reeling. How could someone or something exist without a shadow? How could the body cam see nothing while I saw everything? I tried to rationalize. Perhaps a hallucination, sleep deprivation, stress, but it felt too real, too deliberate. The way the air pressed in, the whispers layered over one another, the way the shadows moved against the light, recoiling from her. It was patient, intent, alive. I stumbled backward toward my cruiser, heart hammering. Every step seemed longer than it should be. The alley stretched, shadows curling, folding in on themselves. The whisper pressed in, low, metallic, inside my skull. Help! I reached the cruiser, doors locked, body cam still in hand. I looked back once. Empty alley, nothing but trash and shadows stretching in impossible angles. But I knew she had been there, watching, patient, deliberate, waiting. Even now, hours later, I can feel it pressing in. The pale woman, thin and unblinking, standing just beyond the reach of light, always watching. The whisper echoing in my skull, layered, insistent. No shadow, no reflection, and yet somehow impossible alive. I haven't returned to that alley. I haven't told anyone. Words fail to capture it. The body cam failed to capture it. And yet I feel her presence every time I close my eyes, every time shadows curl, just slightly wrong. She is patient, deliberate, waiting, and I know she will be back. I couldn't shake the image of her, pale and unblinking, standing by the trash bins. Even hours later, under fluorescent lights of the station, I felt her presence pressing against the edges of my vision. My hand shook slightly as I poured coffee I didn't want. I kept replaying the night in my head, wondering if I had imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. The dispatcher buzzed suddenly, pulling me from my thoughts. "You need to see this," she said, voice tight. The security office had pulled footage from the shopping center. The alley, the dumpsters, the vending machines that lined the wall. Something had been caught, something I hadn't seen while I was there. I followed her to the monitor, body tense, stomach churning. The footage flickered to life, grainy black and white. The timestamp read the exact moment I had been outside the alley. My own cruiser came into view, then the dumpsters, the scattered trash. I scanned for her, the pale woman, and then I saw it. Under the vending machine, movement. Just a shadow at first. sliding along the linoleum, stretching and twisting unnaturally. Then the body unfolded, slow and deliberate, crawling out, hands first, pale and thin, pressing against the floor like claws. Knees followed, then the torso, and finally the head. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the tiny overhead lights. She rose to her feet, still under machine's shadow, her movement smooth but wrong, mechanical almost, as if gravity bent around her. I couldn't breathe. I leaned closer, heart hammering, staring at the grainy screen. The footage had captured what my body cam hadn't. She had been there, yes, but under the vending machine, crawling, patient, deliberate, watching. The air around me seemed to grow heavier. My chest tightened. I could feel it again, that pressure, the same one from the alley, pressing into my skull, my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wiped sweat from my brow, voice trembling. It shouldn't be able to do that. The camera angle shifted. She was standing now, hands pressed slightly forward, as if reaching through the screen, her shadow stretched against the wall, thin, elongated, almost crawling up. But then I noticed the shadow moved differently than she did. One moment it mimicked her. The next it bent at impossible angles, stretching, twisting, reaching past the frame, curling like smoke toward me. I felt my stomach lurch. I knew the recordings wouldn't lie. I had seen too much. The body cam, the dumpsters, the alley, it hadn't captured her at all. But the security footage, it didn't just see her. It saw her in a way that felt deeper. I leaned back, shaky hands gripping the desk. The screen flickered again. The woman bent slightly, tilting her head, eyes locked on the camera, and I could feel it. Her awareness pressing outward, not just at the machine, not just at the camera, but somehow into me. My pulse spiked. I felt my chest tighten, as though she were leaning into my skin. Impossible, I whispered. I wanted someone to say it with me. But the office was empty, silent except for the low hum of computers and the flicker of monitors. I pressed pause, replayed the moment she crawled out. Every frame made me feel smaller, swallowed by the scene. She moved in ways that weren't natural. Limbs bent slightly wrong, head tilting at impossible angles, fingers pressing into the floor like they were sinking into something solid yet unseen. And still, her eyes, wide, unblinking, patient. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The footage seemed to extend beyond the timestamp, lingering. Frames repeated themselves in subtle ways. The shadows stretched longer each time. The floor beneath her darkened, the air itself bending in the black and white video. It was alive, patient, deliberate, watching. I ran my hand down my face, shaking. It can't be real. But I knew it was. I knew it. The feeling in my chest, the tension behind my eyes, the way the shadows on the screen seemed to curl toward me. It wasn't imagination. I leaned closer to the monitor. She crawled again, this time not on the machine, but across the floor, sliding in ways human bodies couldn't. The grainy footage made it worse. The floor warped around her, stretched, bending, like the camera itself couldn't capture the way she moved. And the shadow, oh God, the shadow. It stretched across the floor, crawling toward the edge of the frame, reaching. It wasn't just a shadow. It was deliberate, searching, almost alive. I felt a nausea rise. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my racing heart. But I couldn't. Something in me, something in the footage, refused to let go. The whisper came then, low, layered, inside my skull, not the speaker, not the monitors. Inside me, help. I stumbled backward from the desk. The footage continued, endlessly looping now. Each time she emerged from the vending machine, each time her shadow stretched, twisting impossibly, reaching for the edges of the screen, for me. I realized then I couldn't just watch. I couldn't just observe. It wasn't footage anymore. It was a doorway, a lens into something patient, deliberate, alive. The office lights flickered. Shadows in the corners seemed to move. My pulse hammered in my chest, matching the hum of the computer. I felt it pressing against me again. The same pressure from the alley. The same low, layered whisper threading through my mind. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I had to know. Had to see if it was real. My hands shook as I reached out, fingers trembling over the pause button, but I didn't press it. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed that doing so would break the fragile barrier between watching and being seen. And then, just as suddenly, the footage flickered. The woman vanished. Just gone. No trace. The shadow twisted back into nothing, folding like smoke, leaving the floor empty. Silence pressed against me. Only the low hum of the computers remained. I collapsed back in the chair, shaking, trying to breathe. I knew she hadn't left. Not really. She was patient, deliberate, waiting. Somewhere just beyond the reach of monitors, the screen, the room itself, and the whisper lingered inside my skull. Help? I tried to call it in, report it, get someone else to see what I saw. But when I replayed the footage again and again, she was gone. Just empty space. Just the floor, the vending machines, the static flicker of the camera. Nothing human. Nothing that should exist. I kept the body cam footage separate, reviewing it, comparing frames, looking for anything that might match the security footage. But there was nothing. The camera saw what it wanted to see, or what she allowed it to see. And I understood then the truth I didn't want to admit. She wasn't human. Not fully. And the machines, the cameras, the alley, they were just doors. I left the office hours later, the footage still looping silently on the monitor. The alley outside was empty, trash bins dark and still. Streetlights flickered. Nothing moved, but I felt her patient, deliberate waiting. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every reflection on the asphalt pressed a memory of her against me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see her crawling under the vending machine, rising, hands reaching, shadows stretching impossibly, layered, searching. The whisper repeats inside me. The hum vibrates in my chest. She's patient. She's deliberate. She waits. And I know she'll appear again. I had driven past that stretch of road 100 times in daylight. The old highway cutting through nothing but scrub and dust. The town came into view like a mirage. Empty streets lined with boarded-up buildings. Rusted signs swinging on broken hinges. They called it Silver Hollow. Or at least that's what the faded letters on the old general store claimed. Supposedly abandoned for decades. Supposedly. The call came through late. A neighbor from miles away reporting lights flickering in the old town. Shadows moving behind windows. They sounded frantic, almost breathless. I shouldn't have gone alone. I knew better. But something about empty towns at night calls to you in ways your training can't explain. Curiosity, fear, habit, maybe all three. I parked my cruiser just beyond the outskirts. The headlights caught the edges of the main street, illuminating cracked asphalt and the skeletal remains of street lamps. Dust swirled in the air, catching the light, making the town look like it was breathing slowly, rhythmically. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, radio clipped to my vest. Silence pressing immediately, thick and heavy, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. The first building was the old saloon. Boards hung loosely over the windows, some smashed entirely, glass shattered inside. I swept my flashlight across the interior. Dust, overturned chairs, the faint shape of the piano in the corner. Nothing moved, no sign of life. And yet, I could feel it, the sensation of being watched, patient and deliberate, pressing from the shadows into my chest. I moved down the main street, every step echoing unnaturally in the empty night. Streetlights flickered sporadically, some bathing the area in sickly yellow, others plunging it back into darkness. I noticed the windows of the old hotel first. Second floor lights, small, flickering, inconsistent, not steady bulbs. Something alive. Hello? My voice cracked, bouncing off the buildings. No answer, only the hum of the wind, the occasional shift of boards in the breeze. I approached cautiously, hand on my holster, flashlight scanning every corner. The hotel doors were intact, locked, or maybe just rotted shut. I crouched and peered through the glass. Shadows moved inside, subtle but unmistakable, bending along the walls in ways that made no sense. Then I saw the lights. They weren't normal. Not bulbs. They flickered unevenly, as if something inside the building was breathing, pulsing, alive. Not human alive, not mechanical, but something deliberate. I swallowed hard, pulse hammering. This wasn't supposed to happen. The town was abandoned. Empty. A ghost town in every sense. And yet here I was, staring at movement that shouldn't exist. I circled the building, flashlight catching rusted signs, broken furniture, the skeletal frame of a fire escape. Each step seemed to stretch longer than it should, each shadow curling oddly, like the night itself had decided to bend toward me. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Light, deliberate, but not quite human. Not from the street. From above. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Another step. Soft, almost gliding. Then silence. I couldn't tell if it was real or imagined, but my chest tightened. I stepped closer, moving along the side of the hotel. Flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. The lights above flickered again, slower this time, deliberate, pulsing. I could feel the town watching me. Every window, every broken sign, every empty street corner pressed in like a weight. The wind shifted. The sound of metal scraping echoed from somewhere deeper in the town. Not from the hotel, not near me, but from the main street. I spun toward it, flashlight catching the outline of the general store. The sign swayed, boards clattering. And then I saw it, a shadow crossing the far end of the street. Quick, deliberate, impossible to identify, stretching too long, moving too smoothly for a human figure. I called it in over the radio. Dispatch, you still there? Only static, long and drawn out. My pulse spiked. The air pressed in heavy, and the silence afterward felt like the calm before a storm. I moved forward, keeping low, flashlight sweeping the buildings. Every window I passed showed shadows, movement that wasn't natural. A rocking chair swayed in the corner. Dust shifted along the floors. And the lights, they pulsed, faint and deliberate, as though the town itself had decided to breathe again after decades of silence. I reached the center of the main street, where the old clock tower stood. The hands were frozen at 3 o'clock, rusted solid, but the lights behind the tower flickered faintly. Something high up moved, crossing the broken windows, bending against the darkness. My stomach tightened. Something about this town wasn't just abandoned. It was aware, watching, patient. Then I heard voices, faint, whispering, overlapping. Not words I could understand, just a cadence of speech, multiple layers, pressing against my skull. I spun in place, flashlight slicing the darkness. The buildings loomed tall, shadows pooling in impossible shapes. The whispers pressed closer, and my knees felt weak. I took a step back, trying to rationalize. Maybe an old generator flickering, rats moving inside walls, echoes of wind through broken windows. But deep down I knew better. There was intent here, deliberate, patient, and the town itself seemed to lean toward me, alive with some slow, creeping awareness. I moved toward the edge of town, trying to find a better vantage point. The main street stretched ahead, broken and crooked. Every building I passed had signs of recent disturbance. Shifted boards, footprints in the dust that hadn't been there before, doors slightly ajar that I could swear I'd seen closed moments earlier. Then I saw them. Lights again, deeper in the town, windows glowing with a faint, unnatural hue. And in one I could see movement, not human movement, twisting, bending, deliberate. And shadows stretched in the corners of windows, moving toward me, reaching, patient. My heart raced. I felt the weight pressing down, the whispering voices threading through my thoughts. I couldn't run, not entirely. My legs moved, but slowly, weighed down by the air itself, thick with something unseen. I reached the edge of town, where the old train tracks cut across the dirt. Lights in the buildings flickered once, twice, then went out entirely. The shadows didn't retreat. They lingered at the edges, bending, curling, pressing inward. Silence returned, but a heavy, unnatural silence, like the world itself was holding its breath. I stared back at the town, now entirely dark, the streetlights dead, the buildings just silhouettes against the night sky. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still alive, watching, patient, deliberate, waiting. I climbed back into my cruiser, doors locked, radio static filled, and useless. The town lay behind me, empty, or so it seemed. I couldn't take my eyes off it as I drove away, chest tight, pulse hammering. Something in the darkness had been deliberate, aware. Something had watched me, patient, waiting. Even now, I can feel it pressing against me in memory. Every shadow I pass on a deserted street, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye, reminds me of Silver Hollow. The town isn't gone. It waits, patient, deliberate, watching. And I know I'll go back. I don't know why, but I can feel it. The pull, the weight, the awareness of the town itself, waiting for someone, anyone, to step inside again, because it remembers. It's patient, it's deliberate, and it will not forget. I didn't expect to find it. Not really. The tip came in over the scanner. A neighbor reporting lights in an old farmhouse on the edge of town. Abandoned for years, they said. No one had lived there since the previous owner disappeared. Rumors about debts, foreclosure, or worse. But the lights were on, flickering. I drove slowly along the dirt road, tires crunching gravel, my headlights cutting to the fog that had rolled in overnight. The house came into view, dark against the pale moonlight, windows glowing faintly, warm and golden. The door hung open, just a crack, swaying slightly in the wind. My chest tightened before I even stepped out of the cruiser. Something about an open door in an abandoned house feels wrong. Inviting, patient, deliberate. My boots crunched on the porch boards as I approached. Flashlight raised, fingers hovering near my holster. Inside, the smell hit me first. Not dust, not rot, not the stale musk of abandonment. It smelled like dinner. Warm bread, roasted meat, something sweet baking. I froze. Tables, multiple tables, set with plates, glasses, silverware, napkins folded neatly. Nothing dusty. No layer of years. As if someone had just stepped away. As if they'd gotten up minutes ago. I swallowed hard, scanning the room. Chairs tucked neatly under the table. Candles unlit, but unburned wicks perfect. And yet, the air itself was alive with presence. A weight that pressed at my chest and made my heart hammer. I could feel it in my skin, in the slight tremor in my hands. Hello. My voice was tight, cautious, echoing off the walls. No response, only the quiet hum of the old house settling. Boards creaking in ways that didn't seem natural. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I walked slowly, flashlight sweeping, taking in the table. Plates were arranged carefully, silverware polished, glasses faintly fogged. My stomach turned. Someone or something was here, had been here. But where? And how? The house was quiet, but not empty. I could feel it around me, a presence threading through shadows. I moved to the kitchen, flashlight catching counters spotless, dishes stacked as if recently washed. Steam curled faintly from a pot I could swear had just been stirred. I froze, my chest tightened, my skin prickled. I could hear it then, the faint scrape of a chair against the floor, coming from the dining room behind me. I spun, flashlight slicing shadows. Nothing, only the table, perfectly set, as if the scrape had never happened. My mind raced. Wind through a cracked window, old house settling. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, but I knew better. The feeling, the patient, deliberate awareness pressing in, was real, watching, waiting. I walked closer to the table. Silverware glinted faintly under my flashlight. Plates held a faint impression of food, as if someone had eaten and left moments ago. Not hours, minutes. I ran my fingers along the edge of a chair. Cold, empty, and yet my heart hammered. Something had been here. Something had moved. Then I noticed the glasses. 2 sets. One large, one small. The smaller one had faint fingerprints. Smeared just slightly. Almost too clean to be natural. My pulse quickened. Someone or something had been seated here recently, but no one was visible. I stepped back, flashlight scanning the corners of the room. Shadows pulled oddly. Light from the doorway flickered, though there was no breeze. I thought I saw movement. A subtle shift at the edge of my vision, a dark shape sliding behind the table. I spun. Nothing. Empty. Silent. I tried the voice again, softer this time. Police. Is anyone here? No reply. just a faint creak of floorboards that shouldn't move, the subtle sigh of the house itself. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't normal. Not normal at all. My hands shook as I ran the flashlight along the table again. Plates, glasses, utensils. Nothing out of place. But my stomach churned. Something had been here. Something had been waiting. And it hadn't gone far. I moved toward the back hallway, stepping lightly. The house seemed to stretch, rooms longer than they should be, doors slightly misaligned. I passed the bedroom. Curtains swayed gently, though the window was closed. Dust motes floated in the beam of my flashlight, but there was no draft, no breeze. I heard it again, the faint scrape, the whisper of movement, from upstairs this time. I froze. My flashlight scanned the ceiling beams. Nothing but the presence. It pressed down, deliberate, patient, aware. I could feel it in my bones. Watching, waiting. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath me. Upstairs, the hallway stretched impossibly long. Doors on either side closed. I approached the first, peering in. Empty bedroom. Bed neatly made. No signs of anyone. But the air was heavy, thick, almost breathing. The second door. I reached for the handle. Cold, solid. I opened it slowly. Empty. Closet. Only dust, only shadows. And yet a faint warmth lingered, like a body had been pressed against the floor moments ago. I swallowed hard. My flashlight flickered. I caught it, just for a moment. A shape at the far end of the hall. Pale, too still, then gone. I ran my gaze back along the hallway. Nothing. The shape had vanished entirely. My stomach lurched. My pulse spiked. I knew what I saw. Knew it. The house wasn't empty. Not really. It was patient, deliberate, waiting. I descended slowly, careful not to make a sound. Back in the dining room, I checked the table again. Everything untouched. Chairs neatly aligned. The air thick, heavy with the memory of presence. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Watching. The front door swayed slightly in the breeze outside. I moved toward it. Flashlight on the threshold. A step onto the porch, and I paused. The weight in my chest, the pressure in the air, didn't ease. The house didn't want me to leave. Not yet. Not entirely. I forced myself into the cruiser. Doors locked. Radio crackling faintly in the background. As I drove away, the farmhouse receded into darkness. Streetlights passed in blur. My hands trembled on the wheel. I couldn't stop thinking about the table. Plates, glasses, chairs moved. The faint warmth in the hallway. The shape at the end of the upstairs hall. I replayed every moment in my head. Each creak, each shift of shadow, each flicker of light. Everything pointed to the same truth. The house wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting, watching, patient, deliberate. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see the table. I can see the plates, untouched but warm, the chairs neatly tucked, and in the corner of my mind, the shape that disappeared, the presence that didn't leave. The house is still there, waiting, patient, deliberate, and I know someday I'll return, because it remembers, because it waits. I can still hear it, even now. Not the voice over the radio, exactly, not entirely, but the memory of it, the way it cut through the static, cold and deliberate, patient. It started like any other call. Routine patrol, quiet night, streets empty. My partner and I were driving through the older part of town, the one they warned us about. Empty houses, boarded up windows, sidewalks cracking through weeds. You know the type. Places that feel alive at night, even when they shouldn't. We were scanning the radio, listening for anything out of the ordinary. And then it came, faint at first, static breaking across the channel. My partner adjusted the dial. "What the hell?" he muttered. I grabbed the microphone. "Unit 4 Alpha, you copy?" The static crackled, long and drawn out. Then a whisper, almost too faint to hear. He walked into the wrong house. I froze. The words lingered in the radio, carried across static and silence. My heart pounded. My partner's hand trembled on the wheel. He swallowed, muttering, "Did you hear that?" I nodded, unable to answer. fingers gripping the mic. The voice wasn't familiar, not human, not alive in any conventional sense. It was thin, deliberate, patient, like it existed outside the normal flow of time, waiting to speak, waiting to be heard. I keyed the mic again. Who's there? Identify yourself. Static answered. Then the whisper, repeated, slower this time. He walked into the wrong house. I leaned back, trying to shake the chill crawling over my skin. I'd responded to enough calls to know when my nerves were getting the better of me. But this wasn't nerves. This was something else. Something deliberate, patient, watching. I looked at my partner. His face was pale, eyes wide. "You're not imagining that," he said. I wanted to tell him we should leave. Go back to the station, report it, call backup. But something held me in place. Curiosity, fear, maybe both. We traced the signal, trying to locate its source. The static pulsed strangely, not like a normal radio broadcast. The direction kept shifting, moving ahead of us, following us. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of something unseen pressing closer with every mile. Then, from the back of the radio, a faint sound. Breathing, not normal breathing. Several layers, overlapping, rising and falling together, deliberate. I swallowed hard. My partner's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I keyed the mic again. Dispatch. Unit 4 Alpha. We need confirmation. Anyone else picking this up? Only Static answered. And then the whisper again, soft, almost intimate, curling into my skull. He walked into the wrong house. I couldn't breathe. My fingers shook. My partner muttered something under his breath. And I realized he was praying, not aloud, just moving his lips. I didn't blame him. We reached the address. Small, dilapidated house at the end of a narrow lane. Boarded windows, rotting porch. Nothing about it seemed alive. But the air was thick, heavy, deliberate. Waiting. I stepped out of the cruiser. Flashlight cutting through the darkness. My partner followed, reluctant. The radio hummed in my pocket. Static still faintly crackling, whispering to the layers. He walked into the wrong house. I reached the porch. The wood creaked under my weight. The door hung slightly open, swaying. I could feel it. Something inside, patient, deliberate, aware of every step I took. I took a deep breath, shoved the door open. Darkness inside, thick and heavy, curling around me like smoke. The smell hit me. Old wood dust, something else, something alive. My flashlight beam swept across the room. Tables, chairs, dust motes in the air. Nothing moved, and yet I could feel it. Watching, waiting, patient. I stepped inside. Floorboards groaned beneath me. Shadows pooled unnaturally. I keyed the mic one last time. Dispatch, you still there? Unit 4 Alpha. I'm inside. Static, and then a shift. Whispering closer, curling around my skull. He walked into the wrong house. I froze. My breath caught. The air around me thickened, pressing against my chest. I could feel it behind me, just beyond the beam of my flashlight. Patient, waiting, deliberate. A shape moved at the edge of the light. Too fast, bending the shadows unnaturally. Not human, not alive in any conventional sense. And then it spoke, not through the radio, not in words I could understand, but I knew the intent, the purpose. I had walked into its domain, into its awareness. My fingers tightened on the flashlight. My mind screamed to run, but my body felt heavy and movable. The whispering continued, layering over itself, pressing to the radio now, inside my skull, inside my chest. He walked into the wrong house. I stumbled back. My partner called out my name, panicked, but I couldn't answer, couldn't move fast enough. The shape glided toward me, deliberate, patient. The air hummed around me. Every step it took made the floor vibrate faintly, impossibly. I keyed the mic one final time, voice trembling, whispering over the static. Unit 4 Alpha, do you copy? Only silence answered. Then the whisper, close, intimate, curling inside my mind. He walked into the wrong house. I don't remember the rest clearly. My memory fractures there, edges blurred. like smoke slipping through my fingers. I remember the beam of my flashlight tilting, the shadows twisting impossibly, the air thick and heavy with deliberate awareness. I remember the smell, warm, rotten, familiar, and impossible at the same time. When they found the cruiser hours later, I wasn't inside. The radio was still on, static faintly crackling. They played back the final transmission over and over, each time the whisper threading to the static, patient, deliberate. He walked into the wrong house. No body, no sign of me, just the radio. And the memory. I've never heard another transmission like it. Every time I think about it, I can feel the weight pressing back into me, deliberate and patient, waiting, the house, the awareness, the presence. Even now, when I hear static on the radio, faint whispers overlapping, I remember the shape, the air, the presence pressing into my chest, curling around my mind, patient, deliberate. I know it's still there, waiting, and I know I walked into the wrong house, and it remembers, and it will not forget,